Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our July 27 regular City Council meeting. And it's our tradition to have our Aloha shirts on, so happy Aloha to welcome into the summer. And of course, Mayor Pro Tem just came back from a nice vacation, so
Yay.
he feels right at home. Before we open up the meeting, let me read a statement about our public health officer order. So pursuant to the July 16, 2021 Los Angeles County Public Health Officer's order, everyone in City Council chambers must wear a mask covering their mouth and nose at all times. Additionally, as a courtesy to fellow attendees, please leave one chair between you and the person to your right or left, unless you're from the same household. So thank you for that. And I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I will ask Madam City Clerk if she can please take roll.
Mayor Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Jean Goss.
Here.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Present.
Councilmember Kelly Creeves.
Here.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And I'd like to ask Madam Councilmember Creeves if she can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and inspiration, please.
Sure, please stand. Ready, begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just quickly, I learned today that July is National Independent Retailers Month, thinking that was a great excuse to encourage everyone to visit and support Sierra Madre's local retailers. We, of course, all want our local businesses to thrive, you know, both because we enjoy shopping in town and because we want to support our friends and neighbors. But I didn't realize, did a little research, that spending locally has a much broader benefit to our community. It's called the local economic multiplier effect. I'm sure Councilmember Garcia is quite familiar. But for example, studies done by private research firm Civic Economics and others have shown that on average, 48% of each purchase at a local business is circulated locally, compared to less than 14% if you buy at a chain store. So more of the money stays locally if you are spending at our local businesses. They also generate jobs. Spending at independent stores can create almost 4 times as many jobs as shopping on Amazon. So, and those jobs will be in our community. So bottom line, as we all knew, but now it's supported by empirical evidence, that supporting our Sierra Madre business is good for those businesses, for us, and for other local businesses as well.
Great. Thank you for that plug for our local businesses, Councilmember Creeves. Next item on the agenda is approval of our meeting agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda from council? If not, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Move to approve as presented.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next item, approval for reading resolutions and ordinances. Vote of the City Council to read all ordinances and resolutions by title only and waive the reading in full. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Creeves. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item is approval of the meeting minutes from our July 13 meeting. Did you receive any changes and edits, Madam City Clerk?
No, ma'am, I didn't receive any edits.
Okay. Do we have any edits or changes to report? If not, do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I move to approve.
Councilmember Parkhurst, I think first. Councilmember Creeves second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item is Mayor and City Council reports, and I'm actually going to jump in to do a report first. I wanted to make a statement regarding a parade entry for this past 4th of July parade. I personally received numerous complaints about an entry, and I'm also aware of complaints that the city staff have received. It's important to note that the parade is led and driven by a volunteer committee, and entries are submitted for participation and not for an approval or a disapproval of the entry. Nevertheless, as the mayor of Sierra Madre, I recognize how the entry was viewed as inflammatory and offensive, especially for a family event. The float is not a representation of the city's consent, nor is it, what I believe, a representation of our community values. So personally, I want to apologize for the insensitive nature of the entry. Next, just an announcement is there's going to be another Too Toxic to Trash event. I know that I have a TV that's been sitting in front of our house for a while. This one's at Santa Ynez Racetrack on Saturday, August 7 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that's all I have for report. And I'm going to defer to Councilmember Garcia for celebrating and recognizing our Sierra Madre Pony League and also our softball team. I don't know if you want to go next.
I'll jump in, okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll lead off with that. We had 2 historic runs, one for girls softball, the Sierra Madre Girls Softball Association. They, the 10U team made it to the C Regional State Games, and they placed a 3rd in that. And also our pony baseball team, specifically the All-Stars, the 13U team. So these are the All-Stars that didn't get an All-Star season at Little League. They moved up to pony, and a lot of those same players were able to go to the World Series. And they went to the quarterfinals in the World Series, and they played very well, so we're very proud of them as a city. Also, the Community Services Commission had a meeting last Monday, and a big part of the meeting was the reorganization of the commission, as well as appointments or to whatever park they're in charge of, or which event. It's amazing how many things that commission does for our city. And now we have Chair Ruwinski in charge of that, or leading that commission.
Okay.
And finally, I just want to mention, I've received multiple emails and have talked to people on the street about the burden that MTA has placed on some of our residents here by not having any bus lines running through our town anymore. It really has caused a problem for some people that are not able to drive. One person has to forego their job because they can't get there anymore. So I just want to recognize that at the end of the meeting, I'll request that staff will look into either expanding our roundabout service to bridge that gap, or maybe we can convince MTA to do something better than the MTA micro. We did have that presentation, but I've heard that micro is not really there yet, and that some of our residents are having issues getting around.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next on their council member report?
Madam Mayor, I have no report. I've been on vacation.
That's a good report to give. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll be real quick. I just went to the Planning Commission meeting. We had a development on Carter, at kind of the Carter as it turns, and that was it on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Councilmember Creeps?
Madam Mayor.
Okay, no report. It looks like we'll move on to the next item on public comment. And I'm not sure why all of you are here, except that you are very engaged with local government. It's great to see you. I do want to note that there are 2 presentations that some of you may be here for, which is 1, the update on the housing element, and 2 is the Bailey Canyon project. Those presentations are solely going to be on the process and the procedure of each of those projects. So if you have a comment that is outside of process or procedure of the housing element or the Bailey Canyon project, I would ask for you to speak now at the public comment, because again, we're going to limit the comments for the presentation just on procedure. So again, if you are here to comment on for a project, if you're here to comment on the housing element in general, now is your opportunity, because now we are going to ask for those that are here to speak on items not on the agenda to come to public comment. You have 3 minutes if you can tell us your name and if you're a resident here in Sierra Madre. The timer will be, I think, behind me, and we have our first speaker.
Name is Shirley Moore. I live here in town, and Apologize for my appearance. I've been working all day. I haven't had a chance to get home. I just wanted to make a couple of statements and a couple of points, and they do relate to the monastery development. I've lived in town almost 30 years, and the development pressures in this town have been astonishingly ruthless and relentless, which has prevented me from enjoying living here most of the time that I've been here. Those efforts have often been aided and abetted by city council members, city managers, and city building and planning directors, which is very disturbing. Since you all live here, I don't understand. It's inexplicable to me that anyone would support a project, particularly like this monastery overdevelopment project. Sierra Madre, as we all know, I think, is one of the last great small towns here in Southern California. And I do believe it really should be treasured and cherished and preserved as such. And that monastery development does nothing towards that. The burgeoning wildlife populations, which we've seen in the last 5 years or so, due to all the fires up in the hills, make the desirability of living here in town about 100-fold higher, at least for me. The wildlife corridor on the Meadow will be completely eliminated by this project, and I think that is more than disturbing. Our wildlife neighbors, in my opinion, contribute more to the vibrant dynamic in this town than the human element ever will. I do oppose, obviously, this 42 house development on just about every level. I think City Manager Gabe England left us with a big issue, and possibly with lots of money in his pocket. I do believe it. I'm sorry. There's no reason to support a development like this unless you are going to gain personally from it. This project is going to so detrimentally impact everyone in the adjacent neighborhoods, and you really need to consider that very, very carefully. And I urge you to oppose this project. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members, and I'm not talking about the monastery directly. Preserve Sierra Madre has joined a coalition of groups and cities in California dedicated to monitor the legislature in Sacramento that is undermining our zoning and building laws to change our way of living. This coalition is called United Neighbors. United Neighbors are following SB 9 and SB 10 that are currently being considered in Sacramento and will allow a homeowner or a developer to build multiple family dwellings in a single family zone neighborhood by either a lot split or a demolition of a current houses depending on the size of the lot. This could result in a 4-unit or even a 10-unit complex plumped down right in the middle of a single family neighborhood. This can happen anywhere in California, including Sierra Madre. There are several agencies that are dealing with housing. California Council of Cities and Southern California Area of Governments are 2 that have representatives from city councils throughout Southern California to follow Sacramento legislation. Do we have a council person designated to attend these meetings, and have they had these meetings? If so, are they following this drastic chain of events that will devastate neighborhoods and change the complexion of an entire city in just a few years? As you know, decisions that are being made today in Sacramento will impact our quality of life and Sierra Madre as a whole. If our council representatives haven't been following the progression of SB 9 and SB 10, I urge you to catch up on the progress on these bills and voice your opposition to them. If you like, I can send you some more information, so let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alcorn.
Evening, Mayor, members of the council. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Declan Floyd. I'm a new staff member from State Senator Anthony Portantino's office, and I will be representing the senator here in Sierra Madre. So I just wanted to introduce myself, let everyone in the community see me. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I'll be here this weekend for the opening night of the theater production. You'll see me at some
Great.
community events. So anything that our office can do for you, I'm your guy. So I sent my contact information to some members of city staff. I'd be happy to connect with the rest of you. Just wanted to introduce myself. Thanks very much.
Welcome, Declan. Go ahead. You can just share your name.
I'm Calvin Kenney.
Hi, Calvin.
I live here in Sierra Madre, and I think it's a bad idea to build houses in a fire zone. The houses might burn down, and it's not even good to put them there anyway.
Thank you
That's
for your
all I
comment. Unless you have 2 minutes and 42 seconds left if you have anything else you want to say. Otherwise, thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, council members. My name is Terry Vasela, and I have had the pleasure of living in Sierra Madre for 26 years and raising my 2 kids here. And I am also extremely lucky to be living on Sunnyside. And I live 4 houses from the top of the monastery. There's 2 things I'd like to mention about this proposed development. First of all, in speaking to people about it who are planning it and who've sent out information, it feels to me like we're being threatened in a way. If you don't take these 42 houses, well, then something worse is going to happen. And I don't appreciate the scared tactic because I feel like we're being manipulated into accepting something that is completely unacceptable. And then the other question I have is for all of you. I know you live here, and if you had 750 to 800 cars going by your house every day that weren't there, I want to know how you would feel with that, because I do not feel well about that at all. People walk by our house every day with their dogs. They're exercising up and down our street because it's a beautiful, quiet, and serene place to exercise. And I hope that you will consider all of us residents and how we feel about this development.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Beach. I live in Sierra Madre. I kind of agree with, or I do agree with everyone's comments so far. I'm concerned about, I don't understand, we don't have water. The cost of our water has gone up dramatically in the last number of years since we ran the wells dry. We have fire danger here. We talked about the animals. I have a mama bear and 2 cubs in my yard because there's no place up there for them to live. And then we're going to go add 42 houses that I understand are $3 to $4 million each. I think it's been pretty clear over the years that all of the citizens or residents of Sierra Madre are against making our Sierra Madre into Arcadia with 3 multi-million-dollar homes, and this is what that would do on that. And I understand this would require a zoning change, and I've only seen 1 resident that's in favor of this thing. So I don't know how you could consider a zoning change when probably in excess of 90% of the residents here are against the development. And as the prior speaker mentioned, we've heard that there have been threats of lawsuits and everything else. What makes you think that the residents against this are not contemplating legal action against the city on the other side of this? I think you should also consider that. That's all I have.
Thank you. And before we have the next speaker, Madam City Clerk, I see that you have cards, and what I would typically expect is that we're going to go through the cards and ask them, but let's go ahead and have the next speaker, and then if you want to just start calling people out on the cards that have submitted it. And again, for those of you that may have come in the last few minutes, if you are here to speak on any item about outside of the agenda and or regarding the housing element or the proposed project at Bailey Canyon that is not procedural, this is your opportunity to do so. So please go ahead and fill out a public comment card, give it to the Madam City Clerk, and then we will have our next speaker, please.
My name is Dan Golden, and the clerk has my card, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
And council members and city officials. We know that the city can't arbitrarily suspend the rights of private property owners unless the activity of those owners will directly endanger and jeopardize citizens abutting and farther away from that property. For me, and I did teach urban studies in an Eastern model, which is a very different kind of setting, very few bear, different kinds of wild animals, perhaps. It's important, I think, for you as our elected officials and our leaders to understand that from our perspective, the scope of this project is a direct threat, not just to the Sunnyside neighborhoods, but also in such a small 3 square mile city, to many of our lives. For me, living half a mile from the Bobcat fire last September, and evacuating even though it didn't hit our evacuation level, I was struck by the fact that if the Santa Ynez had blown, this would be a moot point, because the fires would have gone east to west all the way to the Rose Bowl, and we wouldn't have had this conversation because this building wouldn't be here. So for me, I think what's important to keep in mind, and citizens need to know this is not a huge windfall for the city. The city gains 0.0021 cents for every dollar of taxes levied on new properties. Therefore, if they're $3 million apiece, we basically would realize enough money to annually pay for 2 police officers and their benefits. That's about it. There are impact fees, and citizens need to know that, but those fees are already committed by statute to various activities that have to be performed to upgrade sewer and water lines and other utilities that are part of the increase in population up the hill. So for us, for those of us who protest against inappropriately large development, the thing that's probably most galling, and having lived in a city where 37% of the land mass is non-taxable, is that for 97 years, the monastery has paid no payments in lieu of taxes. Nothing. The fire trucks come up. When they flush their toilet, the sewers serve them. The police serve them when there are intruders or other dangers on the grounds. The monastery has had a gravy train ride. They're not the only ones. We have a lot of other nonprofit organizations in the city who share that benefit. And payments in lieu of taxes, legal in many states, up to 19 states now, might be something for the council to consider, no matter what the resolution of the monastery project. Because we live on the side of a mountain, we can't put up big box stores. We have increasing property taxes that are making us a fairly narrow community by class and wealth, and by implication, by race and ethnicity. And it would be great to
Thank you very much, sir, for your
do this.
comments.
Thank you.
Oh, so I'm going to ask Madam City Clerk if she can read now the cards that have come in, and we'll address public comment that way.
There's a card received from Jay Ding on Mountain Trail.
Jay Ding, are you present? Please. And the next person in line for public comment is?
Thomas Padilla.
Great. Okay, so Ms. Ding and then Mr. Padilla. We're going to have Ms. Ding come first. Sir, we're going to have Ms. Ding come first. She's next, and then we'll have you, sir.
She said I was next.
Yeah, please, to the Madam City Clerk. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and the City Council member, Sierra Madre neighbors. Thank you for the opportunity for the speech. My name is Jay Dean. I live in Sierra Madre for 3 years. I oppose the Meadows at Bailey Canyon, aka Monastery Housing Project, on behalf of over 60 signed residents. Tonight, I hand this petition to the city. Since I mailed it 12 days ago, the mail is still sitting in the city P.O. box. I wonder why you guys haven't picked up mail yet. Besides many environmental reasons, it's not a good idea to build a 42 large house on north sunny side, such as water supply, significant increased traffic, fire risk, increased pollution, and population density. I added additionally reason. Human being is destroying wild world. The animal home. One of the neighbors just told me his kids learn about hiking at the Chantry Flat. Now that's been because of fire drowned. They work with deer and rabbits. Nature at Meadows. Sierra Madre cannot afford this type of develop anymore. Another night, I was walking around downtown, saw neighbors brought their own chairs, sitting outside, gathering, chatting, laughing, and share life. Some walking with their dogs. Sierra Madre whole town is a nature park. That's the last peace land of LA. Can you imagine who wants to sit in area with the noisy, loud traffic like a supermarket? If we let this developer in, then sooner or later, the other developer will sneak in. As many excuses to tear down an old house, just like the downstreet Arcadia High area covered by big mansion without any style. Sierra Madre will become Arcadia and Pasadena, lost not only its unique historic style and the people's lifestyle. Should the mayor and the city council member ignore the plea of these residents and other group against that 1,000 voters on recall petition that may be presented to voters, and hundreds angry folks will door to door to gain approval for the recall. The state will soon decide the water shortage. 42 homes, you are drawing state attention that our city does not have enough lower income house. Please add this petition as a city agenda. Sierra Madre Homeowner Association. My name is JD. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Padilla, I believe you're next, and then Madam City Clerk, who do we have after Mr. Padilla?
Nancy Beckham.
Nancy Beckham. Okay, if we can please.
My name is Thomas Padilla. I've been a resident for 40 years. Let me give you a little quick background. I was in commercial and residential real estate development for many years before I retired. I'd like to bring some points to the table. One of the reasons people move up here is they are buying the area. That's what they're buying. They don't care about the houses or the land. They are buying the area. The reason they're buying the area is because the area is what's called a captured community in real estate lingo. There are only 4 in Southern California. Balboa Island in Orange County, Malibu in Los Angeles County, Bel Air above Beverly Hills, and last but not least, Sierra Madre. Cannot develop on Balboa Island, HOAs won't allow it. Cannot develop in Malibu, HOAs won't allow it. Definitely cannot develop in Bel Air, HOAs and money won't allow it. That leaves Sierra Madre as being the only place left where you could even conceivably do this type of development. Which brings me to my second point. You're building an area that in terms of real estate and residential owning is called a non-conforming area. And you are building this area in a residential area that is established for many decades. Statistically speaking, anytime you build non-conforming housing in a conforming area, property values will drop. The lender knows that, and the lender will go by that situation. So that's one of the things that you're dealing with there. Another point that was touched upon was law enforcement officers. One of the things you're going to be involved in with this type of development is Sierra Madre is virtually crime-free, which is why everybody wants to live up here. The reason for that is because the town is tight. If you're going to do anything in town, you're not going to get far before you're going to get caught. This particular residential has 2 exit points Both of those exit points are within 30 seconds of Mitchell-Linda Boulevard. Mitchell-Linda Boulevard is within 3 minutes of the freeway. So anybody breaking out of that area can be on the freeway in under 4 minutes. There's another point, and they haven't found it, and I have 58 seconds left. So I touched upon the reason, I touched upon the growth itself, and I touched upon the crime. That's it. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. You know what, please, I'm gonna ask, we don't allow for applause here. We just want to make sure we're respectful of all the speakers. And we are gonna ask Ms. Beckham to come up, and Madam City Clerk, do you have someone next?
Joyce Kenyon?
Ms. Kenyon is next. Ms. Beckham?
Hi, I'm Nancy Beckham, and I spoke to you 2 weeks ago. And at that time, I gave you a copy of this letter where I detailed everything in terms of the traffic, everything in terms of the land use, you name it. I thought I did a pretty good job of covering it. I also included pictures of what it is like when Southern California Edison comes to North Lima, because the whole street breaks down and we actually have to walk to Grandview and then park our cars below Grandview and walk up, because the trucks are just too big for any car to get out of their driveway or to try to get around the trucks. That's what happens. I understand why you are considering this property. It sounds good. There's a lot of land up there, 42 homes, not so big, right? But I can't get behind this, and I wanted to in the worst possible way, because I didn't think the project was that big, and I saw all the other things that they were talking about. I watched 2 different Zooms. I went to the first initial meeting in March. I have met with the developer on the phone several times. I went to the last open house. I have come here a second time. But I can't get behind this, because it's not gonna do the residents any good, and this is a residential neighborhood. You represent us. You don't represent them. And I understand they own the land, and because they own the land, they can do pretty much whatever they want as long as it's within reason. But I have to tell you something. Those streets that you are talking about have kids, they have dogs, they don't have sidewalks. And to try to do what you're trying to do on that egress coming out of Carter, when you can't even barely turn a fire truck around when they come up Lima and then try to come down North Grove, you're asking for a calamity. I didn't know last year when the Bobcat fire was going on and I watched all the fire trucks go up and down Lima in front of my house. I didn't know they were landing the helicopters in the meadow. I didn't know that. But that makes it even that much worse. So I understand the city would like to find money somewhere. This is not the way to do it. So thank you for listening to me. Please do a nice job of reading this, because I gave it to you 2 weeks ahead of time, so you have no excuse. Anyway, enjoy your evening once you hear all of us, but I have to tell you, there are a lot of people here that want to tell you what they think. And you know what? The sad thing is, because you did all of this stuff during the pandemic, the neighbors don't trust you. And that's what's really, really bad.
Again, I'm really gonna ask for anyone in the audience to please be respectful, and we don't need the chair. No, Ms. Beck, not you. I appreciate your comments. I just want to make sure again that it also consumes time. So let's move on to the next person, Ms. Kenyon, and Ms. City Clerk. Who is after Ms. Kenyon?
Alex Arietta?
Sarietta?
Hello.
Arietta?
My concern is the rezoning that we're going to be going through. I live on Mountain Trail. I've lived here for about 46 years. When we moved in 1974, one of the what appealed to us was that my property was zoned R3. Now I get this card in the mail all of a sudden telling that my yard, my property, is going to be rezoned, okay? So any level down from the R3, R2, R1 is definitely a loss on my property value. I don't know what the heck's going on. I need more information. Why all of a sudden is this happening? I know there's a density thing in this and that, and I have heard that they're going to change some of the properties from 1 to 3 on the boulevard. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't read anything about that. But I really would appreciate it if we had more information in why that a property that has been zoned a certain way for all those years when we bought it, and probably for many years before, I don't know, why all of a sudden are we going through this, and why should we accept the fact that our property values will be going down? Thank you.
And Ms. Kenyon, if you stay for the discussion item, that will be, it's the first item discussion, you can hear a little bit more about that.
Okay.
And hopefully some of the questions that you're asking will be answered. Mr. Arrieta, and who's after Mr. Arrieta, Madam City Clerk?
Gary Hood?
Mr. Hood, after Mr. Arrieta.
Is it okay to speak without the mask or issues?
I think we're supposed to keep it on.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Hello, Alex Arrieta. I live off of Edgeview in Sierra Madre. I'm not sure if you noticed, but last Thursday we had a significant rally right on Sunnyside, and it was put together, and we had a great number of residents there to express very strongly and eloquently their strong opposition to this project. And it was very encouraging because it's not something the city residents have been able to do for the last 15 months. And I think what you're seeing a bit last week and also tonight is a lot of pent-up frustration over this housing development proposal that has been marshaling through and picking up steam over the last 15 months with very little opportunity for public input and for public opinion on this. And it's one thing to do Zoom calls. It's one thing for a developer to get up and talk about Zoom or talk about the development over Zoom. It's very different to be able to have a face-to-face discussion and talk about what the viable concerns are that the residents have about the most significant project in the history of this city. And a number of people have spoken tonight about what makes Sierra Madre special. It's truly a unique, special place that a 42-house development is going to just destroy. And everything that is special about Sierra Madre is not going to be that way anymore after this development happens. So last week when that rally happened and people were able to get together, talk about the development, talk about the challenges with it, talk about their opposition about it, it's really starting to foment, and public awareness is growing around how bad this development project is for the city. And you've heard a number of the primary reasons around that, right? Public safety, right? Helicopters were landing just 7 months ago in those fields to put out fires. Water supply, we're in the middle of a significant drought. It's inexplicable to me why the water moratorium was lifted last year, after 7 years, right before the MOU was signed with the development company, but it doesn't make sense to me. Traffic, we estimate to go up 120%, 740 trips, and then it's the last open space in Sierra Madre. So there are some significant reasons, and many more beyond what I have time to talk about right now, in terms of why I am significantly opposed to this development. There are better ways for the city, for revenue, but also just in terms of development. They are private property owners. We're not saying don't build. We're saying engage the city, get some serious input, present some real, truly viable alternatives. Not the monstrosities that, with all due respect, Gabe showed a year ago with huge monstrosities that would have never passed muster with an environmental impact report, and he knows that. But it was to scare the citizens. So present some viable alternatives and have some engaged dialogue. But I'm opposed to this project for all the reasons cited and for others cited by the residents tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arrieta, and I'd encourage you to watch our last city council meeting when we discussed about the water moratorium and the findings necessary for that if you want more information. We have Mr. Hood next, and Madam City Clerk, who is after Mr. Hood?
There are no additional yellow cards, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members. I'm here to sort of reiterate what Pat Alcorn was saying, because the 42 homes up at the monastery are really insignificant compared to the problem we have. One of the problems we have is in local government passing laws that we have our police chief with over 60 arrests getting kicked back because they're not being approved by a higher authority in the county. This is shameful. The other thing, educating the people by the council, last council especially, and I hope this council grabs a hold of this and looks at. We have a problem in Sacramento. Senate Bill S 330, Senate Bill 9, Senate Bill 10, and I like to say all these SBs are killing us here at the local level because our community hasn't been educated that these bills are taking away our rights. And if our community and our council had been educated to the fact of what's going on and would educate the community, maybe we wouldn't have a big crowd here and we wouldn't be dealing with these problems. But it's very discouraging when you see what's going on at Sacramento, causing our little community to be up in arms like this. I don't know who's responsible on the council for attending these Senate bills and bringing it back to the community, but it may have failed in the past, but we need to do something about that now. We need to educate the community and everybody here to know what the real problem is, and that's the Senate bills. And we need to rise up along with over 150 other communities that are fighting Sacramento, and we feel that our council and our community isn't supporting us. So thank you for the opportunity to bring this up.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. And for those of you, again, that may have came in a little bit later, we are going to have two presentations on the housing element and the proposed Bailey Canyon project, but on the procedure for those. So if you have, okay, and so if you have a comment that is related non-procedurally, this is still your opportunity to speak at public comment. Thank you. And did you submit a card? No.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
My name is Tricia Searcy. I've lived in Sierra Madre for the past 22 years. I have a question regarding the housing element and then what I consider a procedural comment on the housing project. Should I address both now or should I wait?
For your housing, I think the non-procedural one, please make a comment now.
Okay, that one on the housing element. I had a look at the meeting where the people from Making Housing Happen had a meeting, and at that meeting, they were discussing the possibility of doing congressional overlays on church parking lots in our town in order to meet the state requirements, the state RHNA requirements for affordable housing. And what caught my attention was that the Madre de la Rosa property seemed to be exempted from that discussion. The director of Madre de la Rosa was there, and he said, assuming this project is a done deal, we can't help you with affordable housing. We're trying our best. We house 3 people who are workers because the area is so unaffordable, and we understand that. But there's nothing we can do. We can't offer you our parking lot because we have 25,000 visitors a year. And my thought was, why does he consider it a done deal? My understanding is that this project has just been proposed, but it does feel like a done deal. You know, the letters that we get, the communications that are coming, now I'm kind of getting the procedural element, seem to suggest that this is all just a matter of notification of the residents, that this is what's happening. So I'm wondering why that isn't being considered. If you're going to consider offering exemptions from our general plan and zoning laws to build this project, why isn't an alternative maybe for some affordable housing, which would serve a need that we have, just in order to meet state requirements and also a need for our residents, or, you know, senior housing. So that's my urban housing element, and I'll go to the procedure thing next.
Great,
Yes?
thank you so much. And Madam City Clerk, were you able to get her name?
I have Tricia Searcy.
Okay, seeing that there are no other public comments for items not on the agenda,
Mayor, we did receive some emails.
Oh, please, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. The city received 5 emails in opposition to the proposed project at Bailey, Meadows at Bailey Canyon, from Henry Leung, from Alvin and Darlene Byer, from Siobhan Murphy Boyd, from Steve Mosier. There is one that's anonymous. And then the city also received 2 emails regarding their experience at the library, positive experience at the library, from Tanya Miller, and this one is from Sabrina Cham. And there was an email received from Mr. and Mrs. K. Stevens regarding noise and unpermitted construction after 7 p.m. at Alverno High School.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. We have, because of the volume of them, I asked for the Madam City Clerk to report the names and opposition. And so we do normally, and I actually, the last one that you said was the Alverno?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, actually, Madam City Clerk, go ahead, if you could just read that one, please.
The email reads, actually, it's a thread of emails, and so I want to make sure that I'm picking up at the right place. And it says, Dear Mr. Gonzalez and members of our City Council, what is going on with the construction vehicles working at 200 North Michelinda Avenue? Is it permitted? Why was it allowed to take place past 7 p.m.? We can't get a straight or honest answer from AHA, so we are asking you. In addition, we ask that the Planning Commission and the City Council remember Alverno's lack of transparency when it comes time to consider Alverno's request to amend the 2011 CUP and K through 8 TUP. June 29th, Andrea Bertolini, acting as representative of Alverno /AHA, sent the neighborhood a memo stating that the school office would be closed after July 16th. July 1st, we responded and asked, besides Villa events, what else will be taking place? In the past, when the school office is closed, there have still been other noise-producing activities like construction and filming taking place on campus. Ms. Bertolini did not respond. July 9th, we asked again. Ms. Bertolini responded, the school office may be closed, but we still have camp taking place, students on campus, faculty and staff on campus. Ms. Bertolini said nothing about construction activity that would produce vibrational levels and noise that is not typical of our R1 neighborhood. July 19th, this morning, we felt and heard rumbling and then watched from our bedroom as a large industrial dumpster truck along with other heavy equipment vehicles drove onto Alverno's Michelinda parking lot. The vehicles were directed to the southern part of the property towards Highland Avenue. After 7 p.m., we were still listening to construction vehicles working on the property.
And Madam City Clerk, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure this was asked to be read at public comment?
Yes.
Some emails we received that are not asked to be read at public comment, so I'm requesting for clarification.
This was sent to the public comment email.
Yeah,
and
I got a copy of it.
And it's addressed, dear Mr. Gonzalez and members of our City Council.
Okay, so you can read a little bit more of that and we'll finish up the time.
Okay. We find it disingenuous of Ms. Bertolini as a representative of Alverno to send correspondence and sign off with statements such as, if you have any questions, please contact directly. I am on campus during the summer, so feel free to reach out to me at any time. And please let me know if you have any further questions. We did ask. We did not feel it should be so difficult to get our questions answered the first time we ask. Alverno has created an atmosphere of mistrust over the years by failing to inform the neighbors in a timely manner, if at all, about projects like this. Ms. Bertolini did not mention any construction project with earth-moving equipment, a project that impeded our sleep, work, and downtime today. These types of campus projects are scheduled and possibly permits need to be pulled, so why weren't we alerted to this project by AHA? We are tired of not having a response to our questions and concerns or lied to by omission. Or the most bizarre tactic employed by Ms. Bertolini on more than one occasion was to gaslight us as to what was clearly going on in front of our home. Please remember Ms. Bertolini's failure to be upfront with AHA's neighbors when it comes to yet another activity on campus that has impacted the neighbors. Think about what it will be like for the neighbors going forward.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay. All right, now we're going to move on to the presentations. We have noted that they're in opposition, and so we're going to move on with the agenda.
We have read the email.
So, and we have read that. So, and so I'm going to move on with the agenda, and I'm going to ask for point of order here. The next item on the agenda is the housing element, and Director Gonzalez, I'd like to invite you to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. We do have a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. Yes. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the procedural steps for adoption of the six-cycle housing element update, the agencies that are involved, and opportunities for engagement. The Housing and Community Development, HCD, is a state department that determines the allocation of housing units for the Southern California region, consisting of Ventura, Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. And I'm looking at the cyclical chart that's up there starting at HCD, sets RENAs, and I'll be proceeding with those arrows. So HCD has determined that the six-cycle housing element must accommodate a total of 1.34 million housing units across that SCAG region. And SCAG is the housing planning agency who distributes that allocation of units to all jurisdictions. SCAG determined that Sierra Madre's share of the regional housing needs allocation will be 204 units. In compliance with this directive, staff, along with our housing consultant, updated the housing element, analyzed housing needs, prepared a site inventory analysis, and identified governmental constraints and pro-housing program requirements. HCD then has 60 days to review the draft housing element and provide the city with feedback. The city then publishes the draft EIR and provides a 45-day public comment period. The city then holds public hearings before the Planning Commission and City Council to certify the final EIR and approve the housing element. HCD then has 90 days to review and certify the housing element. So each step in the process also allows for community input, including direct input to HCD. This timeline identifies the meeting dates held to date. As you can see, the City Council has considered this matter on 3 separate occasions, the Planning Commission on 2 separate occasions. We've also had outreach with the faith-based organizations regarding the Congregational Lands Overlay Zone, holding a virtual meeting and also meeting in person at the majority of the sites with the leadership of those organizations. We also held a virtual community meeting due to COVID restrictions, and we did go before the Planning Commission on 2 occasions, and tomorrow we'll be holding a scoping session tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. in this chambers. Regarding public outreach in general, the cities must make a diligent effort to achieve the participation of all economic segments of the community before adopting a housing element, and must describe those efforts in the housing element, which we will be doing. And technically, none of the meetings preceding the adoption of the housing element are required, only under CEQA, and only the scoping meeting is required. We wanted to engage as many people as possible, and this is why we had the number of meetings that we did. Upcoming meetings, as indicated in this timeline. So we will be releasing the draft environmental impact report. We are anticipating possibly August 2nd. We are still trying to finalize and review that document as a draft. There will be other opportunities for public outreach with the Planning Commission. We're scheduling 2 Planning Commission hearings and also 2 City Council hearings. So we still have a ways to go on this element, and still with HCD during their 90-day public review and comment period as well. So this particular table is indicating the aggregate housing element sites capacity. If I can refer you to the second to last column, the lighter green row, shows 204 on the far right. Those are the total That's our total allocation for the city of Sierra Madre from HCD and SCAG. The 265 figure that you see just below that is allocating a buffer of 30% above the 204 unit allocation. And currently, with the identified sites that we have come up with, including the congregational overlay, the multifamily opportunity sites total 90. The religious housing overlay sites total 121. And accessory dwelling units total 120. Now, this is over, especially for the accessory dwelling units, this is over an 8-year period, anticipated period, coming up with an average during that time frame. So we are looking at approximately 331 units at this point. Staff has also been working extensively, and we have been doing so since the beginning of the year, to evaluate the potential sites for the multifamily housing to address the city's RENA for the purposes of estimating unit capacity. Some of these potential sites fell within the Measure B boundary and would require public vote to enable redesignation. And other sites involve the designation of an entire block as R3H, or 20 dwelling units per acre. But only those parcels deemed most suitable and likely to redevelop are included in this calculation. To date, staff conducted 3 public hearings before the City Council to present potential opportunity sites specifically back in March, June, and October of 2020, and has continued to refine the site's inventory based on Council and Planning Commission direction. At their October 13th meeting, City Council directed staff to solicit public input on the current sites as shown in the map. And the city has sent letters to property owners of these sites informing them that their property has been identified as a potentially suitable multifamily site based on several factors, including size, location, current use, and development potential. So the housing sites inventory identified 4 areas, and those are shown as the Mariposa Avenue series as Site 1. Site 2, which I can't see, is West Sierra Madre Boulevard. Site 3 is Baldwin and Suffolk, and that's stretched down there. And also Site 4 is the North Baldwin site, very, very small location, right about there. And then we've also identified 4 congregational overlay zones. So starting with St. Rita, and it goes to United Methodist Church. Also the Old North Church, and then the final site here is the, I can't see that, United, that's the United Methodist Church.
Bethany.
Bethany Church, yeah. So those are the site selections that were identified both by the City Council and Planning Commission. As I kind of alluded to before, we were looking at sites within the Measure V boundaries, and at the recommendation of both the Planning Commission and City Council, they directed staff to search for sites that were outside of the Measure V boundary. So that's where we are at in terms of the overall procedure and timeline for this project, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. I'm going to ask if City Council has any questions for Director. And I'll start with the first one, Director Gonzalez. I understand that the initial deadline date for the housing element to be submitted to the state was first October 15, but there was a 120-day window that allows us to extend it a bit. What are the implications or ramifications of not submitting it on time?
The ramifications could be suspension of building permit applications, issuing building permits. The state could also sue the city as well. They've done that with Huntington Beach and Calabasas in the past. They are being very restrictive at this point. They would also, by not certifying the housing element, probably reduce our certification instead of every 8 years, as is now, to could be 5 years or 2 8-year cycles to 4 years. So they can do, we would have to go through this process again in 4 years, and then 4 years thereafter, instead of the 8-year time frame.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from council?
Can we comment?
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. You've put a lot of time and effort into this. It's been a long time coming. I just wanted to say, make a quick comment about why we're sitting here looking at this. This is not something that anybody in town that I know wanted. This is not something anybody on this council, at least audibly, said they wanted. This is being forced on us by the state of California, folks. These RENA numbers are not something that most of us want to deal with. But when I got on the council, I was told we're going to have to find housing sites in a town that's fully built out. How do you do that? Well, you kind of have to wave a magic wand. And so we brought in an outside consultant, and she said, well, look over here. We've got church parking lots that could be built someday. And that, lo and behold, that's what we're claiming. And that's legal, and that may come to pass. But I want you to understand that your local government is somewhat handcuffed on many of these land use issues. And we could use your help, as I believe Ms. Alcorn and Mr. Hood, I believe, were accurate when they said more legislation is coming, which is going to continue to tie our hands further. So we're doing our due diligence here. Director Gonzalez has done a fabulous job trying to keep this together and trying to come up with housing sites that don't exist so that we can meet the legal criteria and we don't get sued. But there's a certain kind of unreality to all of this that I think most people aren't aware of. And I just wanted to make that statement. I thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And there's a process here that we also have to follow, and we will allow for public comment on the procedure and process in just a few minutes. At this time, it is questions and comments from the City Council. So, do we have any questions or comments from City Council?
Madam Mayor.
Madam City Clerk. And Council Member Greaves.
Just one clarification, Director Gonzalez. I think we've actually had one additional city council meeting, because I know that since the new council has been seated, we had a very serious consideration of the housing element, and I don't think that's on the timeline. So I just wanted to
That one is not on there. That's correct. The ones that were there were for site selection. But yes, you're correct.
Director Gonzalez, I also wanted to ask if we received the initial response back from HCID on the initial submission.
I had a conference call with the HCD reviewers on Monday.
Okay.
And we're going to be setting up a second meeting to go over their comments on Thursday as well.
Thank you. And yes, HCD's county, right? I think.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so again, we are going to open it up for public comment on procedural comments. So if you'd like to approach the podium, if you can just state your name, and again, it's on the procedure for the housing element, and next we are going to have the process for the projected Bailey Canyon project.
I'm not sure if this is procedural or not, but the address I'm addressing is 272 Grandview. It is when they placed a granny flat in the front yard of a very small home. It was done in the summertime. The residents were not notified. We never got a postcard in the mail. I happened to walk by and saw the building start and asked questions. Josh in the city office tried to explain it to me, and he basically said we can't stop them or they'll sue us. So there is no front yard in that house. And God help the people who live in the house, because they have got 3 different places where their cars are supposed to go, and they've got the skinniest driveway you've ever seen. So I don't know if this is procedure or not, I'm just telling you, this is happening, and this is a classic case of what you're talking about, Mr. Goss. This is what's gonna come down our throats, and we don't have the room to allow it to happen. It's one thing if it was in the backyard, cause it was a granny flat, but it's put right in smack dab in the front yard.
Okay, thank you. It was not procedural, but I wanted to make sure you, I wanted you to finish,
I
so.
don't come to these things that often, so I apologize.
Okay. Mr. Arietta.
I want to read a statement that was shared in, I think, the last meeting on this. And here's a statement. I don't represent government. I don't represent the planning department. I represent people. I represent property owners, and I feel they've been wronged in this respect. I think we need to find some way to make them whole. I am not concerned with having to change the housing element. If we have to do it, we should do it, if that's what's right for our citizens. Councilman Goss said that
Mayor Pro Tem, yes.
just a couple weeks ago. So the question is, do the rest of the council members feel like that, right? If the housing element, if there's an issue with it, if something has been incorrect, and as a result, we need to spend more time on getting it right, getting citizen input, making things right for residents. You heard from some of them earlier tonight who feel wronged by this. I'm not an expert on this procedure, clearly, but clearly something's amiss here. Right? And all I'm hearing is, well, we'll be sued, or we'll miss a deadline, or the state will do this, the state will do that. The state has its hands full right now with a bunch of different issues and worrying about what's happening in Sierra Madre. So your first charge, your first responsibility, and only responsibility, is to serve the residents of this city. And all credit to Councilman Goss for being so straight up with that comment, which I appreciate and I respect. But again, the question is, what does the rest of the council feel like that? And do you feel like that? Do you feel an obligation to the residents on something as critical as the housing element and the housing project? I won't speak about that again. But that's what I want to say about this. I think it's more important to get the housing element correct. If we pass a deadline, if we don't hit the deadline, it's more important to get it nailed correctly 100% with citizen input and have it done the right way so the residents trust the city council.
Hi, this is David Beach again. On this thing, I'm aware that the federal government, what different administrations have attempted to do on dictating housing, low-income housing. I'm vaguely aware of what California's been doing in Sacramento. I spent time lobbying various bills there. This is the first I've heard of the impact on our city. If you want help and you want the citizens, well, first I agree with the previous speaker. People should be aware of this. You should be making, we need to be aware. This would impact how people would vote at the federal level and the state level, not just here. If they were aware of what's coming down in their community, they might vote very differently. And I think, and you would get a lot more support in helping you, these things, to retain what's unique about our community here. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Any other comments on the process or procedure of the housing element? Please, if you can just state your name, please. Oh.
My name is Craig Bukolski. I'm a long resident here in Sierra Madre at 400 Fairview Avenue. Sierra Madre.
Please.
The issue is brought up of us potentially getting sued. I'm here to say procedurally that's a non-issue, because if that's the case, then we should fight it. Okay, there's impositions on government all the time. I live and work in a government facility. They ask us to do things in cybersecurity that are ridiculous, impossible, duplicate buildings, for example. Our business of Sierra Madre obviously can't process this request. So it seems that at this point we need to document the situation and forward it to our congressman up the chain, where they have a voice at the state level to deal with this in a more cogent way. I will gladly lead that effort as a resident here in Sierra Madre. I'm not afraid of any size organization. Bring it. I love Sierra Madre. I represent it in the parade every year that I can to say that this is the best place in the world to live. It should stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments on the housing element process.
Hello, Mayor, City Councilman. I've been in your chairs before in Burbank. And the mayor, and I was faced with the low-income housing. And they came in and they said, well, this area here and that area here. And of course, the residents didn't like that much. So we put together a plan. And we put it in the drawer. And we always had excuses. Just not quite getting it done. There's always some city thing we could do to put it off. We put it off for 40 years. Now there's going to be a building, very nice building for low-income housing, between the freeway and the railroad tracks. Terrible, but that's what we can do. The point being is there's ways to fight it without being overt about it. Because I can guarantee you, nobody in the city wants 1,000 people to come live here that can't afford to live here. Got it? So you can fight it, but fight it covertly. Yes, we got a plan. You just always something in the way of stopping you from doing something. Good luck.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no one else coming to the podium, I would like to ask Mr. City Attorney Rugosian if he can provide the presentation on the update of the status of the Meadows at Bailey Canyon Project and the procedures thereof.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Can we go to the first slide? Oh, we have an older version then. All right, very good. I can take it from here. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind if I address the audience?
It's fine.
So the purpose of today's presentation, which title page isn't up there, but the title is Procedural Steps and Opportunities for Public Engagement, is to inform members of the public what's to come. Now is the appropriate time to do that because the process is just about to begin. Also, we've been receiving a number of emails from residents, and the emails show that there's some misunderstanding regarding what that process is. So here, during this presentation, I hope to clarify some of those misunderstandings based on the emails that we've received. Again, this presentation is not a presentation in support of or against the project. This is merely a presentation to emphasize what the process is going forward and the opportunities for public engagement. We can keep it at this slide. So based on the emails, I think the first thing we're seeing is that there's some confusion regarding this housing element update and this Meadows project. Folks need to understand that they're two separate things, and both of them, the timing for both of them isn't controlled by the city. So for the housing element, that's something we have to do every 8 years. We do it once every 8 years. There are statutory timelines for those, when they start, and then when they have to end. As Director Gonzalez noted, the deadline for this one is October 15th, but we can potentially adopt it after, but not 120 days after, because then there are serious consequences 120 days after. For the Meadows project, I think someone in the audience had noted that that we started this during COVID. The reason it started during COVID is it's applications in general, development applications, begin once they're submitted, right? Because we don't control when they're submitted. The applicant controls that. So if the applicant submits it, we have an obligation as a city to consider it, and we would do that for any development application. So once it's submitted, we have to determine whether it's complete. If it's complete, then it has to go to hearing, and then there's this EIR process and et cetera that I'll get into. But I just wanted to note that yes, we have a housing element happening. Yes, we have the Meadows project happening, and they're both pretty big, but they're both independent of each other, and they have their own separate timelines. I think so we can go to the next slide. So a couple of points here. The first one, and I just feel like these are necessary clarifications before we get into the process. In terms of limiting or prohibiting housing throughout the city, this is citywide now. As Director Gonzalez noted, there is a housing crisis. The state has determined that the Southern California region needs to produce 1.34 million housing units to accommodate the growing and backed up need. The Southern California Association of Governments, which is a collection of a number of cities in Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, LA counties, has determined that Sierra Madre's portion of that 1.34 million burden is 204 units. Our regional body has determined that for us, so we don't get to choose that. Now we have to zone to accommodate for 204 units. And that's what that housing element process is about. So potentially, during the next 8 years, we could get upwards of 204 new housing units because that's what we're going to zone for, as required under state law. Regarding SB 330, for folks who don't know, SB 330 is a law that was adopted in 2019, and that was the law that legislatively declared a housing emergency in the state of California. When that declaration was made, a host of land use amendments were made, limiting local discretion. So here are some of the things that were limited. First, we can't adopt moratoria on development, on housing development, unless A, it's approved by the state, and B, we can justify it based on some outstanding need. Now, specifically for water moratorium, now today the city couldn't adopt a water moratorium without first HCD signing off on it. HCD is the state body. HCD stands for Department of Housing and Community Development. So the city couldn't adopt a housing moratoria based on any water shortage because 1, HCD would have to approve it. 2, we currently don't have a shortage in water supply. As interim city manager Reynoso will tell you, because he's our director of utilities, we have a surplus in terms of the supply available to us. Our supply exceeds our current demand. With respect to development at the with respect to development at the monastery site specifically, another source of confusion seems to be that individuals think that the city is somehow controlling what gets built up there in terms of what this development looks like. To be clear, the landowner determines what type of development they want to advance. So whether that development's going to be housing or it's going to be some kind of institutional use or whatever, that's something that the developer is going to submit to us for our consideration. But the city can't dictate to the developer, build X or build Y, because the city doesn't have that kind of authority. So that's just that first bullet there. The second is the limitations on the California Environmental Quality Act. So as you know, as many of you know, the California Environmental Quality Act requires big projects that have significant environmental impacts to go through this thing called an environmental impact report. The environmental impact report, as I'll get into later, soon will be released for this monastery project. But know that just because a project has a significant impact does not mean that the city can prohibit that project outright. If the project has a significant impact, but there's a mitigation measure, the city is required to undertake that mitigation measure before it can deny a project. If the project cannot be mitigated, only then can the city consider potential denial. So for those who are wondering what the California Environmental Quality Act is, again, I'll get into that a little bit later. Lastly, limitations on the city's discretion. Now again, what's coming before the city council is within the city council's discretion. The city council can determine whether or not to amend the underlying general plan designation and zoning to allow this project to move forward, or they can choose not to. But realize that the property owner has rights, and they have a right to develop something. And what that something is at this point, not clear. It all depends on what that land use, the underlying land use is. The underlying land use right now is currently institutional, and what they can develop is institutional. If it's changed to residential, it'll be residential. Next slide. There were a number of issues regarding the city's transparency and responsiveness. I really want to emphasize here how transparent and responsive the city has been, because I feel like folks aren't aware of everything the city has done so far. So for example, the transparency portal. If you go on the city's website, the city has this page just set up for the monastery. No other development project has a page like this. There's one project just for this Meadows there's one page just for this Meadows project, and we post all the notices, all the relevant documents that are going to be published. This presentation will go on that transparency portal. Everything goes on that page, and that's available 24/7 to everyone in the public. Next, as California residents, you all have the right under the California Public Records Act to request public documents. We so far have received 8 Public Records Act requests for documents related to the monastery. We have produced 189 documents in response to those records requests that equal tens of thousands of pages that we had to review and produce. The former city manager, and I believe interim city manager Reynoso as well as Director Gonzalez, has offered on a number of occasions to meet with any one of the residents to talk about this project with respect to, again, its process, because we're not advocating for this project. We just want to make residents aware of what their rights are with respect to this project, what their opportunities are for public comment, what the procedural steps this needs to undergo. Residents should be aware of that, and we're here to apprise you of those facts. Enhanced public noticing. We met with the developer recently to go over some of the details regarding their project, and we had the developer agree to provide notice to every single household in the city when these public hearings are when these public hearings are before the Planning Commission, the City Council. Ordinarily, the notice that you would receive in the mail is notice within 300 feet of the site. The developer has agreed to provide notice per our request to every single household in the city. There should not be an issue regarding notice when it comes to the public hearings. No other development in the history of Sierra Madre has done anything like this, and when you ask other cities, no other city requires this of any other development in their respective cities. But we required it because we understand how important it is to the community, and so now every single resident in the city, again, I want to emphasize this because this is unlike any other development you'll see in any other city, will receive notice of this project. Also, when this EIR is ready for publication, 45 days is the amount of time usually required for public comment. We've asked the developer to extend that out for 60 days, so there's an extra 15 days there for public review, because this is a dense document and the public needs that extra time, and the developer has agreed. So now we have 60 days, so we have an extra 15 days for public review for this. Next slide. Again, on the same note, enhanced public engagement. The City Council met on March 10th and April 28th. And if you remember, during those days, they discussed the MOU. And I feel like there's some confusion still with the MOU. And let me clarify it for the record now. The purpose of the Memorandum of Understanding was to outline the procedural steps for processing this application. That's it. It did not commit the city to any single result. It was merely to get the two parties, the developer and the city, in the same room to figure out how this complex process is going to resolve itself going forward. Another benefit to the city of that MOU was that we got the developer to publicly agree to a number of concessions that he can't now back out of, or if he backs out of it, it'll be to his detriment. As you can see, that happened on the 10th and April 28th. On August 4th and the 5th, there were community workshops. On March 9th, there was a presentation before the City Council. On June 14th, there was the environmental impact scoping meeting. Today, you have this presentation before you, and on August 5th, the same presentation will be given at the Planning Commission meeting. Please note that under state law, the only required meeting under state law is the July 14th meeting. None of these other meetings are required, but the city wants to have all these meetings to let the members of the public know what's going on, what steps are coming, what you can expect. Next slide. So before I get into the procedure again, I just need to clarify some terms so we all know what we're talking about. So first, the environmental impact report. An environmental impact report, or an EIR, is required under the California Environmental Quality Act when the city determines that a proposed project would have one or more significant impacts on the environment based on a preliminary review. So the first EIR is going to be the draft EIR that you're going to see. That's going to be published very soon. And once we have the draft EIR out for the public, we're going to receive comments from the public about that draft EIR. And then once we receive the comments, every comment will be addressed in the final EIR, which then has to be certified by the Planning Commission and the City Council. And you'll see that process a little bit later. General plan. That's the second item up there. The general plan is the comprehensive long-term plan for the development of the city. The general plan is at the top of the hierarchy of local government's land use regulations. All other documents must conform to the general plan. What's proposing to be amended here by the developer is the general plan's land use map. This land use map designates certain uses in the city. The developer wants this monastery property to be redesignated from institutional to residential. Next, the zoning code. The zoning code land use map divides the city into separate zones and applies different design and use regulations in each zone. So that's located in the municipal code, and the zoning map is where the zoning map, which is a zoning regulation, reflects those divisions. The specific plan is a plan adopted for particular geographic jurisdictions. So the specific plan doesn't apply to the entire city the way the general plan does. The specific plan applies to a specific portion of the city. A specific plan is not required, but if one is adopted, other land use approvals, such as a design review permit or a tentative tract map for that specific area, must be consistent with it. So there's a general plan, and there's a specific plan. If you adopt a specific plan, all the other approvals have to be consistent with both of these documents. Development agreement. Also something that's being negotiated and will go before the Planning Commission and the City Council. A development agreement is a contract between a property owner and a local government. The benefit to the city is that the parties can contract for additional benefits that they may not otherwise secure through conditions of a permit. So generally in a permit that's discretionary, we have a section called conditions of approval. And in those conditions of approval, we make the applicant promise a certain number of things. Those promises are limited under the federal constitution. There are certain things we can't allow them to promise because the impact on them would be greater than the value of the property. With development agreements, it's different. We can have them promise more than what we could get them to promise under conditions of approval. The benefit to the property owner of a development agreement is that the agreement freezes all applicable rules, regulations, policies, and fees at the time the agreement is executed, which if it's going to happen, it has to happen in the future, obviously, after Planning Commission and City Council review it. Tentative tract map. A tentative tract map is required under the Subdivision Map Act to subdivide a single parcel into 5 or more parcels. So if this landowner wants to build 42 units, they're going to have to subdivide that property up into 42 separate parcels. They're going to have to get a tentative tract map to do that. And lastly, the design review permit. Now, generally speaking, a design review permit is intended to ensure that an applicable project incorporates good design principles and is compatible with its neighborhood and natural surroundings. But in this case, The design review permit would ensure that individual homes are consistent with a specific plan, because we're adopting a specific plan. In order to move this project forward, this project will not move forward without a specific plan. So if this project moves forward and it has a specific plan, the design review permit will make sure that all the homes that are built will comply with that specific plan. Next slide. So this is a little bit difficult to read, much easier on my sheet of paper, but I'm going to try to explain it to you all, and I think it'll make sense. And this slide, by the way, is also on the website, on the transparency portal. So this project, we all have to understand, has two separate tracks. The first track starts with staff. It's that blue box all the way in the left-hand corner. And this whole process begins, because this process has not begun yet. The process is about to begin. And this process begins when the city staff publish the notice of availability of the draft environmental impact report. Once that notice is published, then the public has 60 days to comment on that draft report. And the staff will organize one public hearing to receive public comments based on that draft. Next, so that's the top in the orange next to it. Staff will ensure that the final EIR includes responses to all the public comments received on that draft environmental impact report. And then staff will start preparing a staff report and potential resolutions and ordinances for the Planning Commission to consider. Next, the one that says Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will then have to hold a hearing. During that hearing, the Planning Commission will consider a recommendation regarding certification of the final EIR, right? That's the environmental document, because a project can't go forward without the environmental document being certified. An amendment to the general plan, right, to the land use designation. An amendment to the zoning code, to the zoning designation. Adoption of a specific plan for that specific geographic location. And lastly, approval of a development agreement, because the development agreement is what ensures that the city gets everything that it wants to get out of this project. And then over to all the way at the end on the top right, you have the city council hearing. At that city council hearing, the city council is going to consider every single recommendation the Planning Commission made to it. And it's going to consider all 5 of those same items: certification of the final EIR, amendment of the general plan, amendment of the zoning code, adoption of the specific plan, approval of development agreement. That first column, that first row there, once that's done, that doesn't mean the developer can start building homes. All that means is the land use is now available for the construction of homes. That first row, just to repeat that again, that first row, if all those approvals are done, assuming the developer can get the approvals from the Planning Commission and the City Council, that does not mean that they can start building homes. That just means that the land uses are now ready to facilitate the construction of homes. Now going to the second row. That orange box in the bottom left. In order to be able to build homes, first, the applicant needs to submit a development application for a tract map, right, to divide the homes, to divide the parcels. And second, a design review permit to make sure that it's the design of the homes is consistent with what the specific plan says. Then, staff will review the applications for completeness and prepare staff reports and resolutions for the Planning Commission's review. That tentative tract map and the design review permit will go before the Planning Commission and then ultimately before the City Council. And only then, after completing that second row, only then will the developer be able, assuming that he gets all the approvals he needs, only then will the developer be able to build homes. All in all, this is going to be a fairly long process. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take because we don't know when the hearings are scheduled yet. But frankly speaking, the first box is going to start probably in August, beginning of August. And the first row will probably be completed sometime likely, whether for or against the project, will be completed sometime likely in either probably early next year. If you see there are boxes in blue and boxes in orange, all the boxes in blue are opportunities for the public to attend a public hearing or to provide public comment. And so you can see there's a lot of, there's 5 opportunities at the very least. And this is over months. So there's gonna be lots of opportunities for public comment. I don't want anyone to think that this is a done deal. It's not. There's a lot for the city council to consider. There are a lot of reports that need to be published and be reviewed. And if I could end, I saw 3 consistent, I'd say, misconceptions that I hope that this presentation addressed. First, that this whole process is being rushed. Again, it's not, because the process is just about to begin. The statutory process is just about to begin. Second, this process hasn't been transparent. I hope I've explained that we've done more noticing than required. We've held more public hearings than required. We have a website dedicated to it. There are many public hearings coming. We're happy to meet with anyone. We've responded to public document requests. This has been a transparent process. And lastly, that the public hasn't had a sufficient opportunity for input. Slightly true, because the process is just about to begin. So you will have a lot of opportunity for public input. So far, from the city's perspective, we've been providing you information about what's to come. Now is the time to really voice your opinion and your concerns after reviewing the documents that are going to come before you. And with that, Council, thank you for the opportunity to provide this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney Gregosian. I feel like I was either refreshed or learned something new in this presentation, and thank you for sharing that. And again, this will be on the portal, correct? I do have a question, and I'm going to open this up also to City Council before we open it up for public comment. But on the 2-step review process, the first box is blue, and it's stating that's an opportunity for public comment. Is that first box truly an opportunity for public comment?
Yes, there are 2 opportunities for public comment there. One is that members of the public can comment on the draft environmental impact report.
Okay.
And then also there's going to be a public hearing organized by staff to solicit feedback on the draft environmental impact report.
And so people can email their comments based on their review of the EIR, draft EIR.
They can email those comments, or they can actually show up to that public hearing and then provide their comments, which will also be incorporated and addressed in the final EIR.
You're saying once the public hearings are scheduled?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll open it up for questions or comments from the council.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Garcia.
So, staying in that same box, the first box, in the process, there's going to be a 60-day opportunity for public comment and questions. Then those questions will be answered in the draft EIR, or the next, or not the draft EIR, but the final EIR. And then it goes to staff, which is the next orange box. It says that staff is then tasked with making sure all those questions were asked. I just want to verify that that's true.
Yes, they're going to make sure all the questions are answered.
Answered. I said asked, I know. And then as far as the public comments concerned, and questions that were posed, are they going to be answered individually, or are they going to be grouped by topic? Because I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of questions here.
Yes, most likely they'll be grouped. So some questions are the same question but asked in a different way. Those questions will likely be grouped, and again, it's not just questions that they'll be addressing. They'll also be addressing comments.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else, Councilmember Garcia? Done?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other, Councilmember Creeps?
Madam Mayor, if there is a dispute by someone who submitted a comment or question about whether or not they feel it was addressed in the final ER, would that then be raised at either the next 2 stages, either the Planning Commission meeting or the City Council meeting regarding adoption or certification of the EIR?
Correct.
And then, I guess the follow-up question is, if that's determined, then is there sort of another cycle of review and revision of the EIR?
There could be a recirculation potentially if the EIR is flawed.
Thank you.
So just to make sure I'm clear on that, so after the City Council or even the Planning Commission votes on it, there could be amendments to it in between those steps, is that correct?
Yes, all the documents may be amended. The specific plan may be amended, the development agreement may be amended, the EIR also may be amended, correct.
So what if one of the 5 documents isn't approved?
If one of the 5 documents is not approved, most likely the project cannot go forward.
And then what happens after that?
It ends. The applicant may appeal the decision. Let me just clarify also. The Planning Commission is only making a recommendation to the City Council. Once that recommendation goes before the City Council, it's for the City Council to ultimately determine whether or not to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation, whatever that may be, or to deny the recommendation and do something else. But once the City Council makes a determination in that first row is complete. If it's denial of the project, or if it's denial of their application, in that case, the developer's sole remedy would be, well, it wouldn't be appeal to City Council, it would be lawsuit, if they choose to go that route.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I said I didn't have another question, but one
Please.
popped in my head, thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
So I think it's probably important for the public to understand and know, and the council as well, how the specific plan gets drafted and how the collaboration works, and then before it gets to the Planning Commission. I think that's probably an important fact.
Yeah, actually, I think I would invite Director Gonzalez up to the podium to talk about how the specific plan is adopted, because I know he's been working on that.
So in response to your question, the specific plan was drafted by a consultant, their consultant, and reviewed by a third-party review, which was the city consultant, as well as staff. That is what has occurred thus far. So we will also be releasing the specific plan along with the draft environmental impact report. Both of those documents were reviewed by a third-party consultant.
And members of the public will have an opportunity to comment on the specific plan as well, alongside the draft EIR.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor? So
Councilmember
then,
Parkhurst?
when does the development agreement, so what we're going to see when the process starts is the draft EIR and the draft specific plan. When do we, so I assume that the general plan and the zoning code are smaller because they're just changes, they're just amendments to those. When does the development agreement become public, and what's the process that it goes through?
So the development agreement will become public when it comes time for the Planning Commission to review it, so it'll be part of the Planning Commission packet. And that's currently being negotiated.
Councilmember Parkhurst, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't, Madam Mayor.
Okay. No other questions or comments from council? Okay, so again, just as a reminder, if you have a question or comment about the procedure process, please make your way to the podium and state your name, and we'll make sure to have the timer on.
I have a question for your city attorney. There is a lot of misunderstanding about this EIR that is coming out. People have told me that they feel like the EIR was done by the developers, and I happen to think that that is not true, because Gabe told me you hired an independent contractor to come up with it, and that's why the city couldn't push it through faster, and that's why the development couldn't push it through faster. So is this an independent organization that's coming up with this EIR that nobody has seen yet?
And city attorney, you can answer that.
So I would invite, again, the Director Gonzalez to come up and he can answer that directly, because he's the one that's been working on it.
The way basically the program was structured, the developer hired their own planning consultant, environmental consultant team, And because we structured it that way, that's how they wanted to proceed, we asked the developer that we would go ahead and we're going to hire a third party to review the environmental document. So they paid quite a bit of money for it to be able to go through the process, and it took an exceedingly long time to be able to do. But that's where the third party came in. Developer hired their own environmental consultant. The developer paid for a third-party review hired by the city to review the document and to provide comments to city staff to address those through all of the sections of the environmental documentation.
And so just to clarify there, they draft it, we review it with our independent reviewer because they're experts in experts in EIR and they work for us. So we're working with them to make sure that they review what's been drafted by the developers folks. It is.
It is.
It is. It's.
So, and just a point of order, and Vincent, Director Gonzalez, if you can just go ahead and address, again, there was a question about past tense and present tense, but where the draft EIR is right now in relation to your answer.
Yeah, as we are getting very close to releasing that draft environmental document. So we had reviewed it. Yes, that is past tense.
Great, thank you. Okay. So we can invite the next speaker, please.
Hello there, Tricia Cersei again. Thank you for the time. My first and foremost concern here is that I feel like a threshold question is still outstanding, which is that the way that the city has been communicating doesn't make clear to the residents that they have a choice in whether or not this project gets built. Before we talk about the draft EIR and environmental impacts, the question is that I don't think people understand that under our current general plan and zoning laws, the project cannot go forward. This developer does not have the right to build this project. It's that simple. They do not have the right to build this project right now. And that's not being made clear to people. So I think most people, I heard someone on the news from the rally say, well, they have their property rights. And I feel like the communications that have been going out, the 3 presentations that were done in August were presentations by the developer. They were slideshow presentations. I attended one. There was very little opportunity for questions at the end. I was able to ask only one, and that was it. And then the letter that Director Gonzalez sent out for the scoping meeting made it sound like this is a project, we're just letting you know where it stands, and the specific plan is being developed, and we're going to make sure that things are all done right. You can come see, but there'll be no opportunity it's not a hearing, nothing's going to happen. It seemed kind of like, don't worry about it. So at no point has the city made it clear that the citizens do have a say, and that what are the alternatives? When this specific plan comes before the city council, I should think that you'd want to know, do the constituents think it's a good idea to amend our plan and zoning laws for this project? What would be the benefit to the city to do that? The developer says, well, we're going to give you a park. That's fine, but the developer is not representing the city and the residents. The city council is. So what do your residents want? Do they want a park? Do they want affordable housing? Do they want a senior center? Right now it's zoned institutional. So it may be that the residents think it would be a better idea to require this developer to abide by our general plan and zoning laws. And why should we make an exemption for them? There just has to be, I think, a compelling reason to do so. And I think it's just not being made clear to the residents that they have any say at all. And if that were clear, you might get even more participation than this and less misunderstanding about transparency. Because right now people feel like it's just being railroaded down there. This project is going forward because that's what it sounds like. That's all the communications are coming from the developer. Like I said, at the scoping meeting, it was a gallery that was just poster board of the developer's slides. So I would like to see that something coming from the city or from the city council that indicates to the residents they do have a say, and that this is not a done deal, as the director of the monastery said in that meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Susan Newhausen. I actually want some clarification, so thank you for that presentation. That was helpful to see. But personally, I haven't been getting notices of what's happening, so I'm hoping that we'll get the notice for the EIR. But my questions really have to do with, you laid out that nice thing about the general plan, and then the zoning, and then the specific plan. So it wasn't clear. The general plan said changes so they could make it institutional to residential. Thank you. And then zoning does the same thing. So one question is, I don't really understand that difference. And then you made it seem like it was this hierarchical kind of, stepwise. But then again, there's already a specific plan apparently that's already been examined by Mr. Gonzalez, so it doesn't really fit that the specific plan is being done before all these others unless there's also been background work in those others, and it's also in the past tense. And so I think that's part of the question. And then I guess also the specific plan then, so they can make that to change current restrictions like of the house on lot size, for example, because right now City of Sierra Madre is pretty strict, and it sounds like the specific plan can be tweaked to whatever they want, and they've already started on one, even though they're very vague about what it is, like how many 2 stories versus 1 story. But if you could please address the general plan, difference between general plan and zoning, and this whole thing of changing from institutional to residential, which I think is a critical concern of a lot of us, and then why the specific plan is already done if these other things aren't even started.
So, Mr. City Attorney, if you can just briefly, 1 or 2 sentences on that, and if you would like to meet with staff offline, we'd be happy to schedule it for you. But if you can just take the difference between the general plan and zoning and.
So very quickly, general plan and the zoning code, the amendments that are considered are regarding the underlying land use, what can or cannot be built. The specific plan is going to govern the specific design and development standards, right? Height, density, setbacks, all those specific design and development standards will be governed by the specific plan. General plan land and zoning just govern the underlying land use, what can or can't be built. We use the past tense because drafts are being created and have been created that are going to be released to the public. But nothing is a done deal because the drafts still need to be approved or recommended by the Planning Commission and then either approved or denied by the City Council. So.
Thank you. And again, as a reminder on that 2-step process, the boxes, that first box, the draft EIR that we're talking in the past tense of, is still a draft and it will be released, we're hoping, in August. Okay, Ms. Alcorn.
Yes, I just have a couple of clarifications. I think you may have touched on that, but the draft EIR will it be published, and will it be on the city website, or how do we get notice that this draft EIR has come out?
So I don't know, interim city manager or city attorney, either one of you can address that, please.
Madam Mayor, once the draft EIR is ready, it will be published in the local paper.
The notification of it, and then the actual draft EIR can be found where?
It'll be found on the city's website.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, can you still address the difference between the general plan and the zoning?
And ma'am, I'm gonna ask, so, if we can, we'd be happy to talk with you offline to have staff. I know it's very detailed, and I asked, city attorney to say it in a couple of sentences, so if we can meet with you offline.
Up again. Just a couple comments. You indicated that the council and the city of planning commission have been really giving more information than is required under the law. Giving a near unanimous objection to this development among the residents of the city, I would think you would want to go way overboard on informing people what's going on with this thing. Without the preserved Sierra Madre, most of us would have no idea what's going on up there until the truck started rolling. And I think given the residents' objection to this at this point, I would think you'd have to bend over, I don't know why we would even consider changing the general plan. So, that's it.
Thank you.
In Burbank, you notice one thing, there's no development in the mountains. None. We had a lot of people want to build up there. And we never felt an obligation to change zoning. So tell me, Mr. Attorney, what's the obligation of the city to change any zoning?
And you're not gonna answer that this time, so please, if you wanna continue.
Well, what's the obligation? Is there an obligation? Tonight, could you not just vote and say, no, we've decided we're not gonna do zoning change? What the heck? And the developer is going to sue on what basis? That the city has some obligation to change zoning? Change the general plan? I don't think so. So tell me, why not vote tonight and say, no, we don't want it?
Okay, thank you for your comment, sir.
Well, I want an answer.
And I'm asking for the attorney not to. That's fine.
What's the answer? He's
No,
the city attorney.
And those are the questions I think you're gonna pose. It's not a legal question. I think
Well, it is
more
a
the
legal
question
question.
is to city
That is
council, so.
That is a legal question.
So you can ask,
What's
pose that
the
to city council.
obligation of the city to change any zoning? Period.
Thank you.
zoning that we fought for so hard.
So thank you, and we can address that at a later time. Thank you.
Later time? He's sitting right there.
Thank you. So, Mr. Arrieta, if you'd like to come to the podium, please.
What, you chicken?
Wow.
Huh?
You were a council member?
I know, that's inappropriate. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Well, I think that I clearly you're getting a good indication of, for all you talk about with the number of meetings, the degree of transparency. If there is that degree of transparency, I don't think you see the level of frustration you're seeing tonight, okay? I think it's a very fundamental question. It's a very fundamental question around any property owner in Sierra Madre or anywhere who says, hey, I want to build a monstrosity right here, right? That's going to go before the city, it's going to go before a planning commission, and they're going to say yes or no, right? It's a very simple thing. Why is there a different standard for the monastery where you can't even answer a simple question that says,
You can blame that on me. I'm asking him not to answer and to take any legal stance at the dais. Thank you.
Okay, but to be clear, today, the monastery does not have the right to build 42 homes on that land because it's currently zoned institutional, correct?
It is zoned institutional, that's correct.
Correct, so they cannot build today 42 homes. So, question is, at what point will that come before the city council? Because at some point, you're gonna need to decide whether you're gonna approve this zoning change.
That'll be the fourth box.
Okay, so at some point, that's gonna come before you guys, and you guys are gonna have to decide whether you wanna make that decision. Because earlier, you were making the comment about the city really doesn't have the authority to determine what the monastery builds. You actually have quite a bit of authority to decide what the monastery builds by that zoning change, okay? So, I wanna make that comment. Secondly, with the environmental impact report, initially, New Urban West was saying in their timelines earlier in the year, oh, hey, this is going to come out first quarter. So we're sitting at August. So the question is, how many iterations has this environmental impact review gone through? And how can we see what those initial drafts look like that truly had the real issues? That truly had this, because it's taken 7-8 months for this thing to come out, which is fine, but clearly there were some significant issues in the earlier versions of this EIR that they hired their own consultant to look at, environmental consultant, city hired their own environmental consultant. What the residents want to see is, what did that initial EIR look like? It came back so we can see what those issues really were about that they've spent the last 7-8 months trying to deal with. I think that's going to be a fundamental issue that the city council has to look at. So I think those are the primary things: zoning change, EIR, and then clearly there's a lot of pent-up frustration. Question is, when the comments come in that there's a 60-day review period, is the city staff going to review all those comments, or are they going to be shut down like the comments were tonight by the mayor about opposition to this project? I would hope that they're going to be welcomed and they're going to be reviewed. Thank you.
And I'll just make a statement about the, emailed comments. I'll tell you, we never used to read the email comments. I've allowed for those. And so what I asked the city clerk to do is note the opposition and the names that are released. All the city council members have received those comments, and that is part of our review and our decision-making as we look into this issue. The next comment I just wanted to make too is, city council and the city does not have a say in what the developers are gonna propose. They can propose it, we can go through this process, but I'm hearing mixed questions that we can dictate. We cannot dictate to the developers what they can bring to city council. And so at this time, and ma'am, I know I think you already commented on this piece, so.
You've raised so many different levels regarding all of those plans and everything else. Is this what you're talking about with the plot maps and everything else?
I'm not sure what that is. And I'm gonna ask, Ms. Beckham, if we can look it offline. I don't know what you're referring to, and I wanna make sure, again, we have a protocol. So if, actually, I'm gonna ask Director, Gonzalez if he can just take a look and answer after the meeting what the question is. Okay, so seeing no others coming to, the podium, we'll move on to consent calendar. I'm just gonna ask council for a quick check-in. Do we need a quick 5 minutes, or are we okay to move on? Keep on going? Okay, consent calendar. Madam City Clerk, if you can, present the consent calendar, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the consent calendar, item A is consideration of resolution 21-49 approving certain demands. It is recommended that the City Council approve payment of city warrants in the aggregate amount of $280,543.13. Sierra Madre Library warrants.
If we can have chambers, please keep it down so we can hear the report, please.
Sierra Madre Library warrants in the aggregate amount of $4,471.33. And payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $413,000.
Madam City Clerk, can you, again, if everyone can, exit if you're gonna, continue speaking, it's really difficult to hear the report. Thank you. Madam City Clerk.
Payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $413,531.80 for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021 and June 30th, 2022. Consent item B is consideration of approval of the notice of completion for the Kirsten Court Refresh Project, number CS71901. It is recommended that the City Council approve the notice of completion for this project and direct staff to file the notice of completion with the Los Angeles County Clerk's Office. It is also recommended that the City Council appropriate $27,003.95 from the general fund to cover overrun costs for the project. Consent item C is consideration of approval of change order number 1 to the fiscal year 2020-2021 street improvement project construction contract in an amount not to exceed $84,404. And it is recommended that the City Council approve change order number 1 to the construction contract to COPP Contracting Company in an amount not to exceed $84,404. It's also recommended that the City Council increase water fund capital project by $24,288 to make repairs caused by water leaks in the streets. Consent item D is second reading of ordinance 1445, amending chapter 17.32 R-P residential professional zone of Title 17 zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. It is recommended that the City Council conduct a second reading of Ordinance 1445, amending Chapter 17.32. Consent item E is consideration of the City Treasurer's report for the quarter ending March 31st, 2021. This report is a receive and file report of the cash and investment portfolio for the quarter ending March 31st, 2021. Consent item F is consideration of Sierra Madre budget book for fiscal year 2021-2022, and it is recommended that the City Council receive and file the budget book for the fiscal year 2021-2022. Consent item G is approval of blanket purchase orders in the amount of $45,000, purchase orders over $45,000 for the fiscal year ending 2021 through 2022. It is recommended that the City Council approve the issuance of these blanket purchase orders over $45,000. And lastly, consent item H is the consideration of resolution 21-48, amending the city's classification plan and salary matrix for classified employees, for the Classified Employees Association and the Sierra Madre Professional Firefighters Association positions. It is recommended that the city council approve resolution 21-48, amending the classification plan and salary matrix. Madam Mayor, and this concludes the report.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Do you have any questions regarding consent calendar from the council? Seeing none, we'll open up consent calendar for public comment. If anyone would like to comment on the consent calendar, please make your way to the podium. Is that you, Mr. Alcorn? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back for discussion and/or motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Goss. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Creeves. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item is our public hearing. This is a continuance from our last meeting, and this is a public hearing to consider resolution 21-47 and resolution adopting 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. I'm gonna ask Mr. Interim City Manager Reynoso if you're gonna start this off on this public hearing.
Madam Mayor, Acting Utility Services Director McGee will be presenting today.
Great. Hello again, Mr. McGee, to the podium.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Every 5 years, the city is required to update the Urban Water Management Plan. The Urban Water Management Plan is a long-term resource planning guide to ensure adequate water supplies are available to meet existing and future water needs. Stetson engineers completed our Urban Water Management Plan and are here to give a presentation. I'd like to introduce Stan Chen and Jeff Hazley to do the presentation for you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Jeff Helsley with Stetson Engineers. I'm the engineering manager in our Covina office. Stan Chin's with me here. He was the project manager for preparation of your urban water management plan and worked closely with your staff. So as Mr. McGee just mentioned, an urban water management plan is a long-range water resource planning document to ensure that there's adequate water supplies to meet existing and future water demands. An urban water supplier is defined in the Urban Water Management Planning Act as a supplier either publicly or privately owned, providing water to more than 3,000 customers or supplying more than 3,000 acre-feet annually. And since the city provides water to more than 3,000 customers, they are defined as an urban water supplier and must prepare an urban water management plan every 5 years. I think these started back in 2000 or 2005, so several of these have been prepared and submitted for the city. These are required to be submitted to DWR for the city to be eligible for certain grants and loans that DWR administers. As I mentioned, there's been several versions of this report submitted over the years. Some of the new requirements this round are inclusion of a drought risk assessment. We basically have to assume that there's going to be a 5-year drought starting this year, and we're off to a good start, unfortunately, on that. Let's hope that it doesn't continue, but we've analyzed what if it does continue, and I'll speak to that a little later. There's a more stringent water supply reliability assessment in this version of the report than has been done in the past. We had to assume longer drought durations than we had to in the previous urban water management plans. There are enhanced water shortage contingency plan requirements in the urban water management plan. This year it will include a requirement that I'll speak to about an annual, oh, I'm sorry, jumped ahead a little bit. It includes, requires us to include annual water loss data that the city routinely provides to the state. There's a discussion of seismic risk assessment in the report. There's an overview of the energy intensity use for water in the city. And there's a discussion that the California Department of Water Resources has requested on discussing reliance on imported water and if that reliance can be reduced. So the components of the Urban Water Management Plan include a discussion of water use, both current and projected, and water supply available to the city. There's a water supply reliability review and a drought risk assessment. As I mentioned, there's a discussion of imported water reliance. In 2008, a state Senate bill, X7-7, established targets for water use for the year 2020, and there's an analysis in the Urban Water Management Plan of whether the city met its requirement or not. There is a water shortage contingency plan included in the Urban Water Management Plan. It is required that that be adopted, and it is before you to consider that along with the Urban Water Management Plan. And there's a discussion of the city's demand management measures, water conservation, basically, activities. So some of the key things in the report, the water supplies available to the city include groundwater from the Raymond Basin that underlies the city, water from the West Tunnel in the canyon. There's a project that's underway now to drill a well in the main San Gabriel Basin in the city of Arcadia. It's a joint project with the city of Arcadia that would allow the city to access groundwater from the main San Gabriel Basin. And the city gets imported water from San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. This report discusses each one of these sources and how they're managed, concludes that they're well managed and they're reliable sources. The Raymond Basin Water Master manages the Raymond Basin. San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District manages your imported supply, and the main San Gabriel Basin Water Master manages the main basin. And the report also concludes that the city has the flexibility to manage these different supply sources under drought conditions. A water service reliability analysis is done, looking at both normal years, single dry years, and periods of 5 consecutive droughts out through the year 2045. The drought risk assessment, as I mentioned, based on 5 consecutive years of drought starting this year, is performed. And there's a discussion of an annual assessment that needs to be done and submitted to the state every year starting next year on July the 1st. Basically a review of your water demands at that point in the year and your water supplies. It's really intended to be a look at that point in time to see if you're going to need to utilize your water shortage contingency plan. So the imported water reliance, the DWR has requested these. The city is only relatively recently started using imported water, which is water from the Delta State Water Project. They give a range of years that we can choose to use as a base year. We've selected 2014, when at that time the city's groundwater supply was relatively low. The city was primarily on imported water, so we used that as the base year. We've shown that you're now using the reduced amount of rights in the Raymond Basin, so as a percentage, the imported water use is reduced and projected to be reduced again out in the future, so that you are showing a reduction in the reliance on imported water, on Delta water. The water supply target that was established by Senate Bills X7-7 for 2020, the target for the city of Sierra Madre was 2,006 gallons per capita day, or gallons per person per day, and the actual water use in the city in 2020 was 199 gallons per capita day, so the city is in compliance with SB 7X-7, or X-7. The water shortage contingency plan, the city has an existing one. It is included as Chapter 8. It basically includes discussions of potential water supply augmentation measures you can take, additional supplies you might get, and customer reduction measures that you might take, your water conservation programs. EWR is requiring that we take your existing water shortage contingency plan, which has 4 steps, and basically do a correlation and show them how your 4 steps compare to what they call the standard 6 water shortage levels. And this chart illustrates just sort of how they cross over. The water shortage contingency plan also describes your existing demand management measures or water conservation measures, describes your existing emergency response plan, and includes a seismic risk assessment and mitigation plan. And the conclusion of the contingency plan is that the city would be able to meet its water demands under drought conditions, under existing water supplies, coupled with customer demand reduction measures. In severe droughts, you might need some more conservation. So the conclusions of the plan is that you're in compliance with the goals of requirements of Senate Bill X-7-7. Your supplies are reliable in meeting your demands, both existing and projected demands in normal, single, and 5 consecutive year droughts out through the year 2045. And with your current demand measurements, we anticipate the city would have sufficient supply to meet population growth estimated by the Southern California Association of Governments. That concludes my summary of the plan.
Thank you for that presentation. Council, do we have any questions on the presentation and our water management plan as presented? Councilor Garcia?
So I just want to understand, because it feels like a stress test, which is a good thing, right? To know that we're going to have enough supply. But how was that 5 consecutive drought year period up through 2045 done? Is it a rolling 5 years? We look at different time frames in the future, or is it just one 5-year?
One of the requirements is that we look at 5 years of drought starting this year. And then we looked at what water supplies have historically been available during a drought and the projected population increase to see if you could meet those demands, and concluded you could. That stands the project manager. Then we look at it every 5 years after that to see if you can continue to meet it as the population grows.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
I've read through this entire urban management plan, which took a little doing. And a lot of it I was aware of because I've been involved with the water issues for a while here with my colleague over here, our interim city manager. So I like to cut to the chase. I mean, what I get from this plan and what I've got from our municipal water district recently and from our staff in the last meeting is that even though we are in a really bad drought year in this state, we have sufficient water now and into the future that we shouldn't be circling the wagons, so to speak. Because certainly a lot of people, you might have heard those comments tonight, earlier, are of the view that we are at some kind of stress point where we need to start doing some, unusual, drought-oriented types of things. So what is the upshot of all that? Where are we at?
Well, I would say that it's always prudent to do water conservation.
Right, sure.
Your city is certainly not at a point where you need to do anything drastic with that. The water supply that you have available to you now with your rights in the Raymond Basin and your imported water supply, which is very reliable right now, the city does have adequate water. I think there's very little question about that.
To follow up to that, the well that we're digging now with Arcadia, which should be online no later than 2023, that will provide us with additional wiggle room, or is that part of your assessment when you're saying we're okay right now?
The assessment when I say right now you're okay did not include that.
So that actually gives us a little more room to breathe.
That will give you a great deal more reliability. You'll have a whole nother groundwater basin that has some different management aspects to it, such as the ability to store water, that I think will greatly add your reliability, even increase it even more.
Thank you.
Follow-up question, Madam Mayor? So you mentioned that in your analysis that the availability of the imported water was good, but you said as of now. Is the analysis that you did contemplate any sort of reduction in that availability if drought conditions worsen?
There certainly is the possibility that the state, really the state right now has reduced its allocation of water, but that doesn't mean that the physical water that's available to you and the amount that you need isn't available, because there's water stored in other places. Your provider, San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, has water in storage in the main basin. They can exchange, sorry, getting into the details, exchange with Metropolitan. Right. So even though there's a low state allocation, you can get the water that you need. Those types of programs are going to be needed, because there will be, it's a hydrologically, it's a dry year this year. And those are the kind of programs that get us through those dry years. So we need to do those and expand those. The basin managers will look to expand those as we go forward.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parkhurst?
So, I'll echo what others have said, and like Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Goss, I did read through the whole document. I have to say that it is not an easy document to follow. You have a reference to a table, and 30 some odd pages later, then the table shows up, and I find that very difficult to follow. But that comment aside, I have some specific questions, so I apologize digging into it. When I'm thinking about this, I'm not concerned, about the next 5, the next 10 years, but I'm looking at, this goes out to 2045. So I'm thinking, much further out. And there was an article recently talking about Colorado, the Colorado River. And there was a quote from it that I pulled that says, the hard lesson we're learning about climate change is that it's not gradual. It's not a slow descent into a new state of affairs. Quite literally, it is a massive step change. So when we're starting to look at some of the projected water supplies, I'm looking at the projected water supplies that are in Table 6.9. How does something like that take into account prolonged droughts or even short-term droughts? Does that have to then get adjusted, and does that have compounding effects at other parts in the urban water management plan?
Well, we have tables specifically for drought years. There's normal years, single dry years, and then the 5 consecutive year droughts. We have different supply numbers for those. Now, those numbers are based on history. What has been the hydrology and the availability of supplies in the future. We certainly would agree that there's going to be a lot of variability in the future going forward. We don't have a good crystal ball to use that, so one of the guidelines we've used, which is pretty standard, it may not be very satisfying, but it's historical hydrology.
Well, it's historical hydrology, but then going out, you use RCP4, right?
Yes.
And that's what the CalAdapt model uses, is RCP4. And so RCP4, so this is a global model that is used in all plans of temperature. Is that correct? It looks at concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere out to 2100.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And so RCP4 goes out, it caps off, it actually starts to level out at about 2050 and at about 550 ppm. The other option that's in the plan is RCP 8.5, which is the catastrophic business as usual, going up, and it takes you up to over 1200 ppm in the atmosphere, so 3 times what we've got today. Now, I recognize this is all driven by the state and what they're saying. What I'm curious about is I'm questioning, having looked at this and spending a lot of time looking at climate change, that we're going to meet RCP 4.5. Is there anything, if we were to change and looked at RCP 8.5 or 6.0, which I think is probably a more logical thing, what impact does that have on us further out? So when we start looking at the compounding effects of, not a 5-year drought, but a 10-year drought, a 15-year drought, how does the model take that into account?
The model, the model in this case, in preparation of the plan, gives us a description of what will happen under those different assumptions, whether emissions start to level off at 2050, or if we keep increasing our emissions clear out to the year 2100. And it gives us some data on precipitation. It doesn't directly translate that into how does that impact the Raymond Basin water supply. We're not, the tools we have available for this plan aren't there to allow us to look at that. There's a lot of uncertainty with those. Everybody we've read who's looked at those talks about the uncertainty. So it would change the description of what the conditions would be, the text descriptions, and it would change some of the estimates of precipitation. But the plan doesn't link those directly to what the water supply is, because we don't have a tool to link those in the local level.
So is anyone working on that tool to look at future precipitation? Because that's part of my concern. You know, it says that there are going to be increased precipitation, and actually, if you dig into it, you know, you're going to have much more precipitation in the spring and autumn as compared to the summer. Now, that makes a difference up north, but again, it's, you know, as we have said here, we capture a lot of our rain right here in the San Gabriels. It goes into our basin. We're extremely fortunate, but what I, in looking at this and trying to see how this helps guide us, I don't know what that means. I scratch my head at seeing that there's going to be an increase in precipitation here with an increased temperature. It just, it puzzles me that that's actually what the models say. And what I'm hearing you say is we don't have a downscaled model that works for the San Gabriel Valley because these are global models. Is that right?
That takes us all the way down to the supply level. The models are downscaled to relatively local precipitation, but not down to how that translates into what gets into the groundwater basin. And I want to say increased precipitation is one of the potential outcomes. That's not necessarily a great thing. As you mentioned, it does shift when the water comes, and the water probably will tend to come in more intense storms. That's a problem for capturing it and using it. So, we did use that scenario to describe precipitation and put the data in, but we weren't implying that that's necessarily a great thing and is going to solve any problems. It comes with its own problems. The question is anybody looking at trying to downscale this? There's a lot of work going on there. Everything I've looked at says we have a lot of uncertainty now. I think the key thing is we've got water managers, the Main Basin Water Master, Raymond Basin Water Master, Department of Water Resources, that are trying to look ahead about how do we address those changes. Even though we have a range of them that potentially come, how do we address that and keep a firm supply?
So really, I mean, as you said earlier, we have to really continue to look at conservation because the error bars on this is very large. I mean, you're giving us an average value, but it could be a lot worse than this. Hopefully it's a lot better, but it could be a lot worse. And so, what we have done well in this city, and what I'm particularly proud of, is the generational thought of water management. And so if there are things that we can be doing and thinking about how to prepare for that, because this plan, in my view, doesn't prepare us for 15 or 20 years out. It's great for 5 years. It's great for a 5-year drought. It makes me feel very comfortable near term. But if we can be making investment now to help us in the long term, and the Arcadia Basin is a perfect example of that, if there are other things we can be doing, it would be really helpful to know.
Well, I think I agree with you. Getting into well in Arcadia to get into the Main Basin, get you involved with a lot of other managers over there who are looking at the issue too. That the more you diversify your sources, the more people you're working with to try and address these issues. I would agree. We know less about what's going to happen 15 and 20 years from now than we know for the next 5 years with our supply. I think those projections and the actions we're going to take will be developing over the next 5 or 10 years about what are we going to do for the next 15, 20, or 30 years.
I think we had a follow-up question from Mayor Pro Tem Goss.
Two, actually. in wading through that, plan, and I'm kind of trying to tie it to Councilmember Parker's comment, there was some mention of a tool you used to, integrate climate change calculations, was there not?
That's the.
Is that what he's referring to?
Councilman was referring
Okay.
to, those different scenarios in there, and as I say, we used it for general description and some precipitation data
Right.
to get an idea of how things were changed, but it's not directly linked with the supplies that are presented.
Yeah, especially for long term, yeah. Another question. I know that most of the water that flows into our drainage, falls into our drainage, ultimately is captured somewhere in the San Gabriel Valley by one of the many catchments, one of the many groundwater connections. I think I saw the number 95% in that report. Is it true that if we had a really high wet fall, much wetter than usual, maybe 10 inches in November and December, we wouldn't be able to capture all that in the San Gabriel system? Would some of that actually go to the ocean?
In addition to the San Gabriel Valley, what they call the Central Valley, which is downstream, the Pico Rivera, city of Pico Rivera area, and there's a whole groundwater basin that starts below the Whittier Narrows Dam. They have facilities along the same rivers. I mean, all the rivers end up either the Rio Hondo or the San Gabriel River to exit the valley. They have facilities too. So all of those together on average catch about 90–95% of the water. Where we can't capture the water is if it comes in very intense storms. If our reservoirs are full in the mountains and we get very intense storms, we only have the capacity to take so much at a time in a given day. And that's when if it's spread out over a couple of months, we have very good capacity. If it all comes in a week, which some years that's what it does, you get tremendous flow in a week. We just don't have the facilities with capacities. You have to build huge facilities to take what are basically floods that are going through our flood control system.
Well, it seems like then the agencies, maybe even including MWD, would have an incentive to build an off-stream reservoir somewhere in the San Gabriel Valley for that purpose.
Those types of things have been looked at. Some of the but some of the gravel pits that were looked at when they were
That's what I
finished
think.
mining them. Could you put them in there? And again, you're going to have a diversion facility that has to take a tremendous flow. The pit may have a big volume. But
More than that's bigger than that then.
Yeah, it's a very engineering. It's a difficult thing to do to take those very high flow rates.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just one follow-up to Councilmember Parker's line of concern. This report obviously projects out, as you said, to 2045, but it is a 5-year report. So the idea is then we begin updating this report sometime 4-ish years from now, so that we have a report then that maybe goes out to 2050, and some of the things that you're addressing would be implemented as we develop strategies for the kinds of things, maybe a more prospective look at supply versus using historical data, if we can figure out a way to capture some of the projections in terms of the impact of climate change. Would that be the process?
That's a very good point. Hopefully in 5 years we'll have better tools to look at these issues. It's a very complicated subject, but over the next 5 or 10 years, I'm sure we will have much better tools to look at it.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and officially open up the public hearing on the management water plan.
I thought that was a very remarkable report. It raised the two questions I had. One was that we just got through talking about shortly we're gonna have 204 more units in the city, right? So how much of that is addressed is that they've had that, according to RENA, we're gonna have all this 2 million people or 1 million people. How much of that is addressed as part of this? Secondly, it looked like there was sort of a concluding thing there that says, it talked about augmenting setting conservation. So I wonder how much of that is required for conservation of the water to make this work, because that was one of the things that was the concluded item on there, was that it relied upon consumption, conservation. So I just wonder how big an element is required to have the conservation to make this thing work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn.
Regarding the first question about the RENA units, the urban water management plan does not include those RENA units, those additional units. You haven't amended your general plan yet to incorporate those. We relied on population projections that were done by the Southern California Association of Governments late last year. Those projections do not include the RENA numbers. They've indicated they won't until, I think, 2024. Typically, the population projections are based on what your land use, allowed land use is, right now. Those projects would have to be analyzed, separately as they come along and compared to the plan and what's projected in the plan as far as available supply. The second question about conservation, certainly your current conservation and the conservation you've achieved is included in the plan. There are discussions that if you need to make reductions in demands, if you have reductions in supply, there are different levels of additional conservation that are discussed in there. And some of your conservation measures that are available to you in your water contingency shortage plan are discussed to utilize those if you need to make the reductions.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else on this public hearing item? Okay, seeing none, it looks we are charged to approve 2 resolutions and authorize staff to file. Do we have any comments before we entertain a motion?
I'll make a general comment.
Please.
First of all, I want to compliment everyone who was involved in putting this together, our staff, our interim city manager and the consultant. It was a very impressive document. I agree with Councilmember Parker. It was rather laborious to try to get through, but that's just the nature of government documents. And I love the detail in it. I mean, if you have any interest in water in Sierra Madre, you can find it in that document. I thought it was very interesting how you talked about recycling and we talked about this in our last meeting, how it really isn't pertinent to us right now, but I certainly believe that recycling is kind of the future in Southern California. And there's also, I guess my other thought is that we got down below 10% in terms of system water loss last year, but apparently it's gone back up somewhat because we have such archaic system, down from 32% in 2015. So we've taken some significant steps, primarily through just literally buying a lot of pipe and putting it in the ground. I see that is you're talking about long term. I think that's really our best opportunity, is to be as aggressive as possible at replacing these decrepit water mains, because I think as we do that, we are going to knock it down from 19 and 15, and each time we do that, that gives us more wiggle room. I understand the industry expectation is about 5% loss or 6 or 7% loss. So we could get down to that sometime in the next 5 or 10 years. I think that buys us even more wiggle room. But that's a separate discussion. It's really more of a infrastructural discussion. But all in all, I think this is a really great report. And I see it as good news largely.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Goss. Any other comments on the plan?
I think that the recommendation for the conservation, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Goss that, we have done a great job and need to continue investing in our infrastructure. And I also think we need to be continuing to look at conservation and continuing to take advantage. We've got that 50,000 grant from the Water District. We should look at that and figure out what else we can do to really, the great thing we have with the interim city manager is that he has pushed the in front of the meter processes out there. We have AMI. We have we have the envy of a water system here. But I think we also need to be looking behind the meter and what can we help residents do to get to have the same type of efficiencies and same type of conservation that we've shown at the other end of the spectrum.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt resolution 21-47, 21-45, and to authorize staff to file the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Creeps.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia, for first and second. Any further deliberation on this item? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 And the motion carries unanimously. Okay, we have 3 more items under discussion, and Director Gonzalez, I believe you'll be presenting on the first item for the discussion regarding General Plan Amendment 21-01 and Zone Change 21-01.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. At your meeting on July 13th, the City Council requested that staff return with a discussion item to provide further background and information regarding the adopted 2015 General Plan update and some of the decisions that were made at that time. So the decisions to amend the General Plan, land use and zoning designations were initiated by City Council in July 2009. And this was in response, basically, to a desire to update the 1996 General Plan. So the intent of the General Plan at that time was not a growth-oriented plan, having considered at the time that Sierra Madre is almost entirely built out. There were no directives that were mandated by local, county, or state agencies to implement plans to increase opportunities for residential growth, like we see today. The General Plan and subsequent zoning ordinance amendments to the single-family and multifamily zones achieve the objective for the desire for low-density development intended to preserve the village and small-town character of Sierra Madre. The City Council at that time, in 2009, appointed a steering committee, 9-member steering committee, to act as an advisory committee both to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. That General Plan Steering Committee held monthly meetings from November 2009 to May 2013 to conduct a thorough review of the 1996 General Plan, to conduct community workshops, and also to draft and update the General Plan, culminating in a recommendation for review by both the Planning Commission and the City Council. And then beginning in the fall of 2013, numerous public hearings were conducted by the Commission and the City Council to review that draft update. And in December 2014, the City Council reviewed a draft plan, land use map, and adopted the 2015 General Plan update. Since then, inconsistencies with the zoning map continues to remain and is the purpose of this discussion and the action that was before the City Council at your last meeting. And the intent is now to correct these inconsistencies as required by state law. The Planning Commission, as a result, also reviewed the document on June 17, 2021, and did forward a recommendation to the City Council to amend the General Plan Land Use Map and Zoning Code to achieve consistency between those documents. Staff, as well as the Planning Commission and City Council, also in 2017 amended the General Plan, the General Plan Land Use Map and Zoning Map inconsistencies that were still evident in the open space. So we did that one item, and then since then attempted to achieve on basically several quadrants to update that zoning code as was before you at your last meeting. So staff is recommending that the City Council schedule this matter for public hearing on September 14th, 2021. Notices will be sent to each property owner who have affected parcels through this amendment, A legal notice will be published in the Mountain View News. And at that public hearing, staff will present the City Council with the following alternatives. To approve the City Council Resolution 21-40 approving General Plan Amendment 2101 and Zone Change 2101. To eliminate the inconsistencies between the 2015 General Plan Land Use Map and the current zoning map. The second alternative is to approve City Council Resolution 21-40 and direct staff to explore methods and opportunities to make amendments to the general plan to address the housing crisis and to reflect the current need for affordable housing opportunities. And the last alternative that will be before the council in September will be to approve City Council Resolution 21-40 and to direct staff to initiate another general plan update. This amendment would focus on increased density in the R3 zone and may consider amendments to the R1 and R2 zones. That concludes my report to City Council.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. We have questions regarding the report.
May I ask a question?
Councilmember Crepes.
So just to kind of put a bottom line on this, because I think there's a lot of confusion in the public about the nature of the update to the zoning map as we're considering. My understanding now, having had the discussion previously and then your report tonight, is that this update of the zoning map is not affecting any change, that the change in zoning or land use densities were done via the 2015 adoption of the 2015 general plan amendment or new general plan, and that perhaps the zoning map should have been more contemporaneously updated, but we're now at a point where those updates that would have occurred closer in time to the adoption of the 2015 general plan, just reflecting the reality of what the general plan mandated. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
So you mentioned that there was a zoning map update in 2017, and it was only for open space. Is that correct? And what was the process, and why did that happen, and why did we not do the whole map at that time?
So the 2017 update, zoning map update, was in response to a couple things. First of all, right after the 2015 general plan update, we ended up concentrating efforts to achieve consistency with the general plan regarding updating our zoning code. So we spent a few years actually updating the zoning code, concentrating on hillside management zone, single-family residential, multi-family residential. So that was a big priority for City Council, Planning Commission, so we spent much time doing that. In 2017, we still had a number of parcels that were identified as hillside management zone where they should be zoned as open space. So we decided to go after that component of the update at that time. And just to give you an explanation why there was a lapse in time, again, I had a number of staffing issues. At the time, there were only 2 of us here. And then we had staff transitioning, so we ended up losing some staff. This is actually the 3rd attempt that I made to try to finalize the zoning map consistency effort. And finally, with the help of Joshua Wolf, who's our associate planner, and his skills, research abilities, and also skills with GIS, we were able to tackle that effort, which took at least 9 months of his time to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilmember Parkhurst?
Can you explain to me the difference between the second and the third option before us? Both of them sound like it was an update to the general plan, but I wasn't clear on the distinction between the two.
So the third option would be if you feel that we are not responding adequately, or the general plan and the various housing bills that have passed in recent years isn't reflective of what our general plan should look like, it's up to the city council to make that decision whether or not we want to update the general plan in some capacity and look at implementing ways to encourage more affordable housing projects in the city. That could be done through the general plan. And looking at also increasing density in R1 zones, R2 zones as well, to R3 or changing R1 to R2. So that's another option. That would be a long-term effort. It wouldn't be implemented certainly this fiscal year. We would have to budget for that in the coming fiscal years. And that would be hiring a consultant to help this effort move forward. The other one was just to look at other opportunities to amend the general plan, again, just specifically to address, again, the housing crisis and looking at affordable housing opportunities. Certainly responding to some of the bills that we've seen in the past, as well as moving forward, as had been discussed this evening, even by some of the residents and their concerns about that as well. But being able to maybe formulate a general plan amendment to address that specifically.
And what's the complexity of that one? So one of them is a long-term, requires hiring a consultant. The second option sounds like it's more strategic opportunities to update the general plan to respond to housing bills. So what's the complexity and cost of that? Approximately, I just need horseshoes and hand grenades.
Complexity, we still may need to hire a housing consultant to help with those efforts. It's also very much like what we're doing with the housing element now. We have identified in the housing element potential opportunities for affordable housing. Taking this next step would help us to identify additional opportunities for development.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
I think maybe I've already been told this in my one-on-one with the city manager, but I just don't recollect. If we were to amend any aspect of the general plan, and we're talking about bringing in consultants, do you have any idea what that would cost, just off the top of your head?
Well, for the last general plan update, that was done at a local level, community level, with the exception of the environmental document for the environmental impact report. And that environmental impact report, just for the consultant, this was back in 2015, 2014, 2015, was upwards of $200,000.
Now, isn't that putting the whole thing together? I'm talking about just an amendment.
That was putting the whole thing together. So looking at the preparation of general environmental impact reports now, exclusive of putting the project together with another consultant, a housing consultant, help put this together. We'd probably be looking at both inclusive of an environmental impact report and the other effort with the consultant, probably closer to $500,000.
Thank you, Director.
Okay, Councilmember Garcia?
So thinking long-term, and you discussed option 3, I don't remember the resolution number, but that would be a general plan update. My fear is that, and I'm not suggesting this, but let's say we zoned everything R3, right? I feel like SCAG would still throw big RENA numbers on top of that. So that question, in that scenario, is it better to be reactive to RENA or proactive? Because that sounds very proactive.
Right.
I think maybe reactive is probably the better way to do it.
I would probably agree with you. I would say we probably want to be reactive in that situation, because we don't know what SCAG and HCD is going to do in the future in terms of unit allocation. We also did look at, I believe we even brought that before the City Council as an option, and it was rejected, and directed staff to look at other options, but to look at increasing the density on all R3 properties to 20 units per acre from 13 dwelling units per acre. But again, yes, you're correct. I would say that we would probably want to be more reactive to whatever allocation is sent to the city of Sierra Madre.
Any other questions before we open this up for public comment? And again, tonight is a receive and file report, and this item will come up for further discussion and action on September 14. Okay, seeing none, we'll open this up for public comment.
D. Alcorn on Grandview. There's two things about this now. Pat made a point about SB 10 and SB 9. We talked about people are really worried about 42 houses up in a monastery. We're talking about maybe 200 houses or something like that throughout the city. So I'm saying that they ought to really pay attention to just what she said, because you're talking about peanuts, 42 houses, 204 houses, or some number like that. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen unless people take action and worried about this thing up here. I think that's a legitimate concern up there, but it's peanuts. People ought to really pay attention, because that's peanuts. That's peanuts. They really ought to pay attention to about the whole big picture. And because 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're going to reallocate all this stuff, and the big houses going up in there, and it's going to be peanuts. And I say people ought to pay attention to not just today, but they think about what Sacramento is imposing on everybody, and you say, okay, well, you guys take care of it. You can't. Your hands are tied, just like you said. Your hands are tied. You can't do a thing. I just want people, if they're watching like that, pay attention, because it's coming, and let you do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. Any other comments on this issue, this item?
Hello, well, I'm Jim Watson, 150 South Baldwin, and hello, Mayor and council members. I've had a little time to look into exactly what's going on with the zoning off the city website. There's more properties than what I'm going to talk about, but the ones that I was concerned with are the ones that are going from R3 to either R2 or R1. And there's 151 properties in that that are concerned here. My wife and I took a walk up at the top of Baldwin, and there's a lot of properties that are actually zoned R3 and built out as R3. Some of them are what I'd call like a California bungalow or a California court, very nicely done, and they're slated to go R2. So if they were destroyed, they could not build them back. And there's a law that appears that they could build them back in the first sentence, but then it goes along in about 15 more sentences. It basically says it's very subjective, and they wouldn't be able to be built back. So it's just not fair to take that away from people that developed their property and they were conforming up to this point, and so if it goes through, they'd become non-conforming, and they just couldn't rebuild. So, okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Do our tag team. I'm Kathy Watson, and happy to be with you again tonight, Mayor and council members. Just have just a few things to follow up because I did submit the written comments to you. And I wanted to let you know that we've, since the last meeting, talked with 6 additional people about these issues who are in the neighborhood. Auburn, Laurel, and Mountain Trail. And of those 6 people, 4 of them said they were going to email comments, so I don't know if those came in. But it was Ralph Timor, Leslie McCall, Carol Roundtree, Maggie Ellis, and Andrea and Mira Boris, and then Joyce Canton, who did speak early on. I think she was a little out of order but didn't realize it. So I wanted to let you know that that all of those people expressed that they really didn't know anything about this, and they expressed their opposition to it as well. So that was number one. And then number two, I'm not a math whiz, but when you were speaking about the housing element earlier and the projected 204 units, and then we take 151 currently zoned R3 units and take those away, it's coming pretty darn close to canceling out the numbers that the city is looking for. So I don't understand that. And then lastly, I guess I wanted to ask if you had any questions for me from our written comments that we submitted.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Watson.
Thank you.
Director Gonzalez, I do have a question that I'm going to ask you to come up for, please. Oh, do we have another? Oh, so I'm going to ask him a question. Huh? Oh, okay. So question, Director Gonzalez, is the housing element was submitted based on the general plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any other public comment, please?
Hi, hello. I own a house that's zone R3 currently.
Can you just share your name, please?
Charles Carrillo.
Thank you.
And I guess my first question is, what is the motive to downzone the existing R3s and R2s to R1s?
Okay, and good, continue.
And another one is that I find it very unfair because when I bought the house in 2012, one of the big factors for buying it was the R3 zoning. So my bargain back then was I could have bought an R1, not worried about it, but then the R3 now that seems to be that it's being taken away, and that obviously results in a loss in value of that property. But my big question is, what is the motive? If kind of repeating what this lady said, that on one hand you're looking at changing R1 to R2 and R3, but then in this situation you're looking at downzoning, so it's kind of confusing in terms of what you guys are trying to do.
Thank you. And I'll just reiterate what Director Gonzalez had shared, is that the general plan, which is the land use designation map, was passed in 2015, and that it was passed as a low density, correct? As low density at that area. So this is the map that we've already been using in planning, and that we've been abiding by, and again, that was submitted for the housing element. But the zoning now is going to be consistent with that. So I know that's very confusing, and I know this question came up during our last meeting, and it will continue to be a question, I think, on the September 14 meeting. But the general plan already that was passed dictated what the land use map is going to be. And so the low density, sorry, there's a lot of flies here. The low density, high density is being aligned now with the R3 and R1. So please, if you have next comment.
Council members, my name is Eric Lynn, property owner at 182 South Baldwin. Two things. I appreciate you guys listening to our concerns and revisiting this issue and continuing to look into it, and having the director kind of analyze and see how best you can utilize these R3 properties that aren't on the general plan, but be able to help the city meet its goals for kind of housing needs. And second off, when I was purchasing my property just a few months ago, we had checked with the city planners on, because the zoning at the zoning map that we looked at showed my property as R3, and because of that, I could build a certain number of units on the property. And we checked with the city, and based off the zoning map, we're told that as long as I submit an application within a certain time frame before any changes to the zoning map go into effect, I could build based off the zoning map, not the general plan. So in that sense, I'd be going off the zoning map, not the general plan, because when anyone's looking at a property, buying a property, everyone's looking at the zoning map. No one's going into the general plan to look at those maps to try to figure out what I can do. We just go off the zoning map because that's usually the best guide for what you can do. It's easy to just go on Google, you can search up any city, look at the zoning map, and you get your guideline of what you can build. Then you look at the code to see how much you can build, your setbacks and everything like that. But that's kind of the guideline, and that's the way we go about it, and we go looking into it. And it's not the general plan. That seems to be a little kind of like which one takes precedence, which one kind of comes first. I know the general plan is kind of the larger idea, but when you're talking to the city planners and everything, the zoning map and the current zoning code seems to be what everyone kind of talks about, everyone provides feedback based off of, and not the general plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item?
I have one further question.
Okay, normally we don't allow for everyone to come back, but please, go ahead.
Thank you. So is there any recourse for the homeowners, or basically this is just controlled by the city council? Because I still think it's kind of an unfair thing that it should be grandfathered for those that have purchased and made the same assumption as the gentleman over here said. When I bought my house, I did similar, basically you do your due diligence, but then now it's just like that the city council saying we're going to change it, and this is kind of the process. So that's my question. Is it just kind of a done deal, and I'm just here just to feel good that I'm just kind of venting my frustration?
Thank you. So this item will be up for discussion and approval or disapproval on September 14. And then recourse, I'm just going to ask Mr. City Attorney just to note that, and we can follow that up at a later time. Okay.
Mayor, there were emails received on this. 7 emails were sent in and spoke in opposition to the changes to the R3 and R2 zones.
And we did receive all those via email?
Yes, they were submitted via email.
Okay, can you just read off the names for those that opposed it, please?
Yes, ma'am. Email received from Maggie Ellis. Email received from Stephen and Carol Roundtree. Email received from Barbara Velturo. Email received from Leslie McCall. Email also from Marla Sean Black. And the Watsons submitted, but they made comment today. All emails were forwarded to the City Council for their approval, for their review. There were 2 more emails, Samantha Smith and Jason Soda.
Ms. Watson, it sounds like the names that you recited are in there. Okay. So seeing no other comment, again, this is for receive and file, and this will be on the agenda on September 14. Okay, we have last 2 items. We have a presentation by Chief Bartlett on the Fire Hazard Reduction and Habitat Restoration Project. Hello, Captain Schneider. Did you surprise him because he almost looked like I am?
6 minutes, right? That's right. Okay.
Hi, Captain Snyder.
Mayor, council members, great to be here tonight. Rich Snyder, Fire Marshal. Just bringing a presentation to you tonight on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Fire Hazard Reduction project that we did with the CCC. We finished up that project about a month ago, and I wanted to bring you a follow-up as to the results. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Fire Hazard Reduction and Habitat Restoration Project was designed to mitigate wildfire hazards, promote a healthy forest, reduce greenhouse gases, and the scope of the project involved alterations to existing conditions of the land by removing dead and non-native plants and trimming overgrown vegetation to reduce the fire hazard. And the chief maybe do this video in here.
Oh, we're wondering what the dark sky. Neat.
Oh, drone action.
Very cool.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. So we're 6 weeks into our California Conservation Corps greenhouse gas reduction project. Literally thousands of man-hours have been put in at Wilson Trail and Bailey Canyon. And as you can see, Bailey Canyon has never looked so healthy. We're really proud of what's happened here. The project has gone better than we expected. We've got 2 more weeks to finish up, and we're looking forward to the results. So the goal of the project was to get some of the non-native invasive vegetation to provide for a healthy forest. Also to take the native and hazardous brush, thin it out, and reduce that fire hazard. So as you know, we haven't got a lot of rain this year, so we're anticipating that we may have a challenging fire season ahead of us. By doing this fuel reduction, that's going to limit the use of fire getting out the door. Come on into Bailey Canyon, go to Mount Wilson, see the progress that's been done. Fire safe, healthy forest.
Cool. Nice. You're a natural, Captain.
So we, the project, we did hazard mitigation on 20 acres of land, city property. Involved 5 CC crews from LA and Pomona. Over 12,000 man-hours at a cost of $387,000 greenhouse gas reduction funds that was paid by the state of California. So this is pretty much a state project that we sponsored. So these are the maps showing the areas that were cleared and the kind of breakdown of the crews. And that's Mount Wilson. That's an after picture of, that's a good example of a shaded fuel break, which is what our goal is. So I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Captain. And I think almost all of us went to thank the Conservation Corps. I mean, to know that there's 5 different chapters or units that came out, all the hours that were put in. And again, the timing couldn't have been better when Councilman Parkhurst brought it up, that these were GGRF dollars from the state that we didn't have to take out of our own budget is really phenomenal. So I appreciate you bringing this as a presentation. I know Councilmember Krebs was asking for it so that the rest of the public can really appreciate what you've been able to do in the last few months, and thank you for leadership on there. I know you took quite the lead in that, and to the entire fire department for that. So any questions or comments for Captain Snyder?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Krebs?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I know we spoke at the meeting with CCC, and I thought it would be, you explained a lot of things to me that I thought it would be good for the broader community to hear. One thing that you and I talked about at that time was that a fair amount of the brush that was removed wasn't necessarily actually removed from the site, and then it was laid down or left where it was cut. Can you just explain sort of what that process is? And because I think there was some concern that actually wasn't a mitigation if the brush was left there.
Yeah, sure. So part of the project, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, is very specific about the environmental impact of the project. And all the vegetation, with the exception of Bailey Canyon, inside the park itself, the vegetation at Mount Wilson up in Bailey Canyon was cut and what we call lop and scatter. Everything remained on site. It's cut into small pieces, it's spread on the ground, provides a mulch, keeps moisture in the ground, which is one of the greenhouse gas goals, promotes future growth. That moisture prevents erosion, and it's a natural process of the revitalization of a healthy forest. What nature does, we just help speed it up.
Thank you. And I would say, having met some of the crews, I would say that there was 12,000 person hours because there were quite a few women on the crews.
There were. There was one leader that I was very impressed with, and she's actually going to come visit the fire department and we may be looking at, she'd be great on our department.
Great. Okay, any
Madam
other
Mayor?
questions, comment? Councilmember Parkhurst?
So it was 5 crews that were there, Captain Snyder, is that right?
That's correct.
And so the picture you had 2 different shaded areas, the yellow and the green. Can you tell me what's the difference? I thought you said it was the crews, but there's 5 crews. So can you tell me the difference between the green and the yellow and the?
Sure. Pomona had 2 crews and LA had 3 crews.
Okay. And you mentioned that this was a fire break. So if we were to have the Bobcat fire and the Santa Ana winds came down, how would this have helped our community from that perspective?
So a shaded fuel break isn't designed to actually stop a fire, but it slows it down and spreads it out so you can have a fighting chance. One of the concerns on Mount Wilson, that's a good anchor point for us. If for a fire up Mount Wilson, we would take an engine to the trailhead and there's a fire hydrant there. The brush had gotten so thick. The last time it had been cleared, I think, was during the station fire in 2009. They improved the fire break up there. They actually put fire breaks all across our front country in 2009. And it was getting to the point where it became too hazardous to, you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to commit in there or not. So during the Bobcat fire, crews came into town and they worked on the east side of town and put in a fire break above Camillo and up across the east side of town. Because of lack of resources during the Bobcat fire for the agencies, or for all the agencies for the fire plus COVID, we weren't able to get the clearing done over on this side of town. In lieu of that, we did have the fire organization, the fire itself, purchase Foscheck, and we did long-term retardant up at the trailhead to protect us in lieu of doing vegetation management.
Excellent, excellent. So you'd mentioned this is under the GGRF program, and so I happen to know the Deputy Executive Director that oversees this program. I wanted to let you know I shared our thanks with her and asked her to share with her staff the program and how it's being seen on the ground. And so I want to thank the fire department again for your quick thinking on this. I know there was some scrambling in getting the money and acting quickly, and you know this means a lot to me and the things that I want to try to do to protect the community. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions before I open this up to public comment? Seeing none, thank you, Captain. Do we have any public comment on this item? You're funny, Dee. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to our last item, Librarian Smart for the library annual report for 2021.
I was gonna say I was saving the best for last, but he had a video, so. Okay. The narrative of this year at the library has not been an easy one to write, but out of the trials, we've created joyful interactions in a year that I will never forget. It would be impossible to give this annual report without some background information. On March 12th, 2020, I received a message from the city manager to close the library and send staff home until we discussed what to do at our executive team meeting the following Monday. I worked and researched all weekend, not knowing what that meeting would bring. But when I proposed that we view library services as emergency services, the city manager extended a whole lot of trust and belief in the power of libraries and said yes. By Wednesday, we were offering emergency services to the public, which allowed us to check out large bundles of books as a one-time per household deal to assist while they stayed safer at home. One parent specifically lauded these efforts because her 2 children read a book a day during the safer at home orders, and she would have otherwise spent $1,500 on Amazon. We were the first in LA County to do so, and in part due to staff and with the help of strict policies and patron assistance, we've had no staff COVID cases this year. The way we began informed our choices this year and contributed to our success, as portrayed in the pictures you see on the screen. Throughout the pandemic, we pivoted to outdoor story time in the park, also the first in the county to do so, using kiddie pools to mark space. We curated programs which provided outdoor experiences and Zoom programs, as with One Book, One City's selection, A Walk in the Woods, and we adjusted popular programs to a hybrid experience, as with the Gingerbread Jamboree building together on Zoom. One adult participant in the bear hunt program said that she never looked for the bears herself, but simply sat in her window to hear the squeals of joy as young children found her bear. This was a small way she stayed connected with her community in a time when those opportunities came few and far between. For circulation, our service model switched over to book bundles, as you can see here. Bundles were curated by staff, and we also had juvenile mental health and wellness kits and backpacks that served our patrons very well this year. As you can see, circulation has steadily grown throughout the year, the blue marking 2021 and the orange 1920. By December, we were circulating around 75% of normal, which was a very different outlook from our neighbors. And in June, we exceeded pre-pandemic levels.
Wow.
And while the circulation numbers are impressive, and we spent an inordinate amount of time crafting individual bundles, we also use the time wisely to work on projects that will benefit the public and improve the library for years to come. We started looking into RFID in February of last year, but took advantage of the building being closed to the public and completed the project throughout the pandemic. This included weeding the entire library, individually tagging every item, and purchasing and installing new self-checkout equipment. It also included demolishing part of our circulation desk, creating a better lobby space, and a lot of help from IT. Additionally, the library received several grants and updated the local history room to reflect what it was actually being used for, a small multi-purpose room. This was a group effort. Friends of the Library funding paid to install cabinets to cover existing bookshelves. Community Foundation funds paid for tables which move and nest as needed. And the library spearheaded writing a grant for $12,000 in technology and programs, which was selected and overseen by IT. And Public Works removed furniture, installed heavy technology, and painted the room. Then on April 19th, we opened for limited hours and fully opened on May 10th. Due in large part to the support of City Council and staff, we did not reduce our staffing throughout the pandemic, which made our reopening relatively seamless. Patrons entering the building for the first time repeatedly talked about how the library became part of their pandemic routine, picking up bundles of books, Try It Tuesday or activity bundles, and checking in with someone who actually cared. This year we are focused on building improvements, community mental health, and other services. The Phase 1 building improvements will begin to take shape as Kirsten Court wraps up, and I'm working on other projects like discussing with the Metro Micro program to give a training to staff to help community members who are impacted by the changes in the program. As we continue to meet the needs of our community, we look forward to the improvements which are being made at the library in the next several months and years. And thank you. It has been my pleasure to serve the library this year in the city.
Thank you, Librarian Smart. Really quite impressive statistics considering where we were last year, even the year before. And you know this, that the online access to audiobooks and borrowing books of the Libby app has been my savior. So thank you so much for that. Do you have any questions for Librarian Smart with this report? Any comments?
Madam Mayor, I have to say, and your report made me tear up a little bit, that I feel like the feedback that I've gotten from the community about the library during the pandemic has just been glowing. I mean, I think it's really been the savior for a lot of families, particularly families with young children. And I just commend you and your staff for just being so creative and so outside the box thinking to create this community where we were all lacking in community. And it's sort of the silver lining. It seems like a lot of the things that you were able to do during that sort of distress time are now things that can extend into the future and really improve the scope and the depth of services that the library can provide. And you can tell by your circulation numbers that you've attracted new patrons and new use and in a time where the building was closed. I mean, that's just incredibly remarkable. So congrats to you and your staff for all that you've done. And just know that I think the public really recognizes that, because I get a ton of feedback about that. The library improvements or the programming being the silver lining of the pandemic, and really hoping that sort of continues into the future.
Thank you. Cheers, cheers. Echoed on that. Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Parkhurst?
So I believe we had one of the first cities in LA, the first libraries in LA County. And so we were a pioneer when we were founded, and you continue to do that today. That's just extraordinary. You know, if Captain Snyder was the head, you were definitely the heart. And I think I'll echo Councilmember Krebs. I think all of us teared up a little bit. It is an incredible testament to everything you've done. Talk about taking lemons and making lemonade. You look at the renovations that you've done. You took a once-in-a-century pandemic and turned it into something to come out the better end, the other end much better. I can't thank you enough for that. It is just extraordinary.
Hear, hear.
Definitely, and you know, I know that our library is the envy of very many libraries in the community, and it's because of your innovation and what you've been able to do, so. And then I was just told that our library was founded before our city was incorporated, so that's a piece of trivia fact that I don't think I know, and look at City Attorney Garagosian says he thinks he knows that. You knew that?
We drafted a staff report on it when we created the Library Board of Trustees.
Very nice. So that's on your next on the next trivia game for the next event that we do. So thank you so much, and please thank the staff and extend that to them also, and all of the volunteers. I know you have support already in this room that stayed till 9 o'clock. So thank you. Okay, with that, we are at the end of our agenda. Unless there's public comment on the library. Oh yes, me. Yes. I knew you didn't hang out this long to not make a comment, Ms. Palmer.
Oh, Ann Palmer, 622 West Allegria. And thank goodness you answered what I was going to make, is I hope you are aware of how incredible our library shone during the pandemic, and you answered those questions. And I won't go into all that was done because she showed that in her annual report. So I guess I'm here to show my support for an extremely important part of our community and to publicly give kudos to our librarian, Christine. So that's just,
thank you, Ms. Palmer. Okay, and seeing no other comment on the library presentation, we'll bring it back to council. I know Councilmember Garcia, you have an item that you'd like to see on upcoming agendas.
Yeah, I'd just like to have staff look into either bridging the gap with the Gateway coach from what we lost. As I said, we do have community members that were greatly impacted by losing both lines that were running through our town. Or even getting in touch with MTA to see if we could get some type of bridge service for our residents.
Any other items for upcoming agendas? Not that we don't already have our hands full for September, October, November.
I guess we do. Maybe I shouldn't.
No, please, Mayor Pro Tem Goss.
I'm hesitant to do this, but I've gotten a number of emails recently. We've had public comment here a couple of times about our district attorney and his impact on public safety. I don't know where I'm at on that now, but I'd like to hear a discussion on our council about whether or not we support him or not, or whether we at least want to send a message to him about some of the policies of his department.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Goss. That's noted. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Parkhurst.
So we heard a number of people tonight talk about the concern with what's going on in Sacramento and a number of the bills. I'd like to get a discussion on how we can stay apprised at what's going on there, so we can make informed decisions and not be surprised of what's coming down, the next thing that ties our hands.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Alcorn is jotting that down very happily. Any other comments before we close? So we are dark in August, but we will be ready and energized for September because we have some heavy agenda items. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy August, and we'll see you back in September. And the meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.